Chapter 8 of Hagar of the Pawnshop by Fergus Hume. This recording is in the public domain. The seventh customer and the Mandarin. There was something very queer about that lacquer Mandarin, and something still queerer about the man who pawned it. The toy itself was simply two balls placed together. The top ball, a small one, was the head, masked with a quaintly painted face of porcelain, and surmounted by a pagoda-shaped hat jingling with tiny golden bells. The large ball below was the body, gaily tinted to imitate the official dress of a great Chinese lord, and therefrom two little arms terminating in porcelain hands, exquisitely finished even to the long nails, protruded in a most comical fashion. Weighted dexterously within, the Mandarin would keel over this side and that to a perilous angle, but he never went over altogether. When set in motion, the big ball would roll, the arms would wag, and the head nod gravely, a little red tongue thrusting itself out at every bow. Then the golden bells would chime melodiously, and rolling, wagging, nodding, the Mandarin made all who beheld him laugh with his innocent antics. He was worthy, in all his painted beauty, to be immortalized by Hans Andersen. "A very pretty toy," said Hagar, as the quaint thing tipped itself right and left, front and back. "It comes from China, I suppose?" She asked this question of the customer, who demanded £2 on the figure. But in place of answering her, he burst out into a hoarse laugh, and leered unpleasantly at the girl. "Comes from other side of nowhere, I reckon, missus," he said in a coarse voice, "and a bloomin' rum piece of goods 'tis, anyhow." Hagar did not like the man's looks at all, although she was by no means exacting on the score of personal beauty, especially with regard to the male sex. Still, there was something brutal about this fellow which revolted her every sense. He had a bullet head with a crop of closely cut hair, a clean-shaven face of a blue-black dirty hue, where the beard had been removed, a low forehead, a snub nose, a large ugly mouth, and two cunning gray eyes which never looked anyone straight in the face. This attractive gentleman wore a corduroy suit, a red linen handkerchief round his throat, and a fur cap with ear-flaps on his head. Also he carried a small black pipe between his teeth, and breathed therefrom an atmosphere of the vilest tobacco. Certainly the toy was queer, but the man queerer. Not at all the sort of person likely to be in possession of so delicate a work of Chinese art and fancy. "Where did you get this?" demanded Hagar, drawing her black brows together and touching with one finger the swaying Mandarin. "It's all on the square, missus," growled the man in an injured tone. "I didn't prig the blessed thing, if that's yer lay. A pal o' mine is a sailor brought it from Lord knows where, and guv it me. I wants rhino, I do. So if you kin spring 2 quid, I'll give you 20 shillings," said Hagar, cutting him short. "Oh, my bloomin' eyes, if this ain't robbery and blue murder!" whined the man. 20 bob! Why, the fun you gits out of it's worth more. That's my offer, take it or leave it. I don't believe you came honestly by it, and I'm running a risk in taking it." "Sling us the blunt, then," said the customer sullenly. "It's the likes of you as grinds down the likes of me." "Yah, you and yer preachin'." "In whose name am I to make out the ticket?" asked Hagar coldly. "In the name of Mr. William Smith. Larky Bill, they calls me, but 'tain't hetiquette to put henderin family names on pawn tickets. I lives in Sawder Alley, Whitechapel." "Why didn't you go to a nearer pawn shop, then?" said Hagar, taking down Mr. Smith's address, without smiling at his would-be wit. "That's my biz," retorted Bill, scowling. "'Ere, gimme the tin, and don't you arsk no questions, and you won't be told no lies. D'ye see?" Hagar stamped her foot. "Here's the money and the ticket. Take yourself and your insolence out of my shop. Quick!" "I'm getting," growled the man, shuffling towards the door. "See 'ere, missus." I comes fur that doll in 3 months, or it may be 4. If it ain't all right, and 'and it up to me proper, I'll break your neck." "What's that you say?" Hagar was over the counter and close at hand by this time. Larky Bill stared open-mouthed at her spirit. "You say another word, my jailbird," said Hagar, seizing his ear, "and I'll put you in the gutter." "Lordy, what a Donna!" muttered Bill, rubbing his ear when he found himself outside. "She'll look arter the toy proper. 3 months. Tsk!" He rapped his thumbnail against his teeth. "I can't get less from the beak, but I've bested Monkey anyhow." And with these enigmatic words Mr. Smith turned on his heel and went to Whitechapel. There his forebodings were realized, for at the very door of his own house in Sawder Alley he was taken in charge by a grim policeman and sent to prison for 4 months. He had stolen some fruit off a coster's barrow on the day previous to his arrest, and quite expected to be, as he phrased it, nabbed for the theft. Therefore he employed the small remnant of freedom still remaining to him in pawning the Mandarin in the most distant pawnshop he could think of, which happened to be Hagar's. As Mr. Smith left the court to do his 4 months, a wizen-faced man slouched close to him. "Bill," he growled, edging against the policeman, "where's that doll?" "That's all right, Monkey. I put it where you won't get it," grunted Smith. When Black Maria rolled away, with Bill inside, the man he had called Monkey stood on the edge of the pavement and cursed freely till a policeman moved him on. He had a particular desire to gain possession of that doll, as he called it, and it was on this account that Larky Bill had taken the trouble to hide it. Monkey never thought of a pawnshop. It was a case of diamond cut diamond, and one rogue had outwitted the other. In the meantime, Hagar, quite unaware of the value attached to the Chinese toy, placed it away among other pawned articles upon a high shelf. But it did not always remain there, for Bolker, a child in many ways, notwithstanding his precocious intelligence, found it out and frequently took it down to play with. Hagar would not have permitted this had she known, as the toy was given into her charge to keep safe, and she would have been afraid of Bolker spoiling the painting or rubbing off the gilding. Bolker knew this and was clever enough to play with the Mandarin only when Hagar was absent. He placed it on the counter and made it sway in its quaint fashion, the waving arms, the nodding head, and the rosebud of a tongue slipping in and out, enchanted the lad, and he would amuse himself for hours with it. It was strange that a gilded toy, no doubt made for the amusement of grave Chinese emperors, should descend to afford pleasure to an Arab of London City. But the Mandarin was an exile from the flowery land, and rocked as merrily in the dingy pawnshop as ever he had done in the porcelain palaces of Pekin. A month or 2 after the Mandarin had been pawned, Bolker announced in the most unexpected manner that he intended to better himself. He had been given, he said, the post of shop-boy in a West End bookseller's establishment, and as he was fond of literature, he intended to accept it. Hagar rather wondered that anyone should have placed sufficient confidence in this Arab to give him a situation, but she kept her wonderment to herself and permitted him to go. She was sorry to lose the benefit of his acute intelligence, but personally she had no great love for this scampish hunchback, so she saw him depart without displaying much sorrow. Thus Bolker vanished from the pawnshop and from Carby's Crescent, and ascended into higher spheres. Nothing new happened after his departure. The Mandarin remained untouched on the shelf, and the dust collected over his motionless figure. Hagar quite forgot about the toy and its pawner, and it was only when Larky Bill was released from prison and came to claim his property that she recalled the incident. She took down the figure, dusted it carefully, and set it swaying on the counter before Mr. Smith. Neither Bill nor Hagar noticed that it did not roll as easily and gracefully as usual. "Here's the quid and interest and ticket," said Bill, tendering all 3. "I'm glad to get this 'ere back again. No one's touched it, 'ave they?" No, it has been on that shelf ever since you pawned it. Where have you been? Larky Bill grinned. I've been stayin' at a country 'ouse of mine for my 'ealth's sake, he said, tucking the mandarin under his arm. Say, missus, a cove called Monkey didn't come smellin' round 'ere for this himage? Not that I know of. Nobody asked for the toy. Guess it's all right, chuckled Bill gleefully. Lord, to think as how I've done that bloke. Won't he cuss when he knows as I've got 'em? What them were, Mr. Smith did not condescend to explain at that particular moment. He nodded familiarly to Hagar and went off, still chuckling with the mandarin in charge. Hagar put away the money and thought that she had seen the last of Bill, but she reckoned wrongly. 2 hours afterwards he was back in the shop, mandarin and all, with a pale face, a wild eye, and a mouth full of abuse. At first he swore at large without giving any explanation, so Hagar waited till the bad language was ended and then asked him quietly what was the matter. For answer Bill plumped down the Chinese toy on the counter and clutched his fur cap with both hands. "Matter, cuss you!" he shrieked furiously. "As if ye didn't know. I've been robbed." "Robbed? What nonsense are you talking? And what have I to do with your being robbed?" Bill gasped, and pointed to the mandarin, who was rolling complacently, with a fat smile on his porcelain visage. That doll," he spluttered. "I've been robbed." "Of the doll?" asked Hagar impatiently. "Ye young Jezebel." "Of the diamonds. Diamonds!" "Diamonds!" echoed the girl, starting back in astonishment. "Yes, you know, hang you, you know. 20,000 pound of diamonds. They was in that doll, inside him. They ain't there now. Why not? 'Cause you've robbed me. Thief! Yeah." "I did not know that there were any jewels concealed in the mandarin," said Hagar calmly. "Had I known, I should have informed the police." "Blown the gaff, would ye? And why?" "Because a man in your position does not possess diamonds unless he steals them. And now I think of it," added Hagar quickly, "about the time you pawned this toy, Lady Deacey's jewels were stolen." "You stole them!" "P'raps I did, p'raps I didn't," growled Bill, mentally cursing Hagar for the acuteness of her understanding. "'Tany rate, 'twarn't your biz to prig 'em. I tell you I never touched them. I did not know they were in there." "Then who did, cuss you? When I guv you the doll, the diamonds were inside. Now they ain't." "Who took 'em?" Hagar pondered. It was certainly odd that the diamonds should have been stolen. She had placed the mandarin on the shelf on the day of its pawning and had not removed it again until she had returned it to its owner. Seeing her silent, Bill turned the toy upside down and removed a square morsel of the lacquer, which fitted in so perfectly as to seem like one whole piece. Within was the dark hollow of the ball. Empty. "I put them diamonds in 'ere with my own 'and," persisted Bill, pointing one grimy finger at the gap. "They were 'ere when I popped it, and they ain't 'ere now. Where are they? Who's been playing with my property?" "Bolker!" cried Hagar, without thinking. It had just flashed across her mind that one day she had found Bolker amusing himself with the mandarin. At the time she had thought nothing of it, but had replaced the toy on its shelf and forbidden the lad to meddle with it. But now, recalling the episode and connecting it with Bolker's sudden departure, she felt convinced that the imp had stolen the concealed jewels. But, as she wondered, how had he become cognizant that 20,000 pounds worth of diamonds was hidden in the hollow body of the doll? The thing puzzled her. "Bolker?" echoed Larky Bill wrathfully. "And who may that cuss be?" "He was my shop boy, but he left 3 months ago to better himself, I dessay. With my diamonds, I'll bet. Where is he, that I may cut his bloomin' throat?" "I shan't tell you," said Hagar, alarmed by the brutal threat of the man, and already regretting that she had been so candid. "I'll make you. I'll twist your neck," raged Bill, mad with anger. He placed his great hands on the counter to vault over, but the next moment he dropped back before the shining tube of a neat little revolver, which levelled itself in Hagar's hands. She had lately purchased it for defense. "I keep this always by me," said she calmly, "to protect myself against such rogues as you." Bill stared at her blankly, then turned on his heel and left the shop. At the door he paused and shook his fist. "I'll find that Bolker and smash the life out of him," he said hoarsely. "Then, my fine madam, I'll come back to lay you out." After which he vanished, leaving the Mandarin with its eternal smile still rocking on the counter. Hagar put away the pistol and took up the figure. Now that she knew about the diamonds, and had forced Bill to admit, as he had done indirectly, that they had been stolen from Lady Deacey, she thought it possible that the Chinese toy might belong to the same owner. In spite of her fearlessness, Hagar was not altogether happy in her mind as regards the burglar. If he did not find the diamonds, he was quite capable of returning to murder her. On the whole, Hagar concluded that it would be just as well for society at large, and herself in particular, if Mr. Smith were restored to the prison whence he had lately emerged. After some consideration, she resolved to see Vark, the lawyer, and tell him the episode of the Mandarin, taking the image with her as evidence. Vark, if anyone, would be able to deal with the intricacies of the affair. In the meantime, Bill Smith had repaired to the public house which guarded the narrow entrance to Carby's Crescent, and there was drowning his regrets in strong drink. As he drained his tankard of ale, he fell into conversation with the fat landlord, a brutal-looking prize-fighter who looked as though he had been in jail, quite a bird of Mr. Smith's feather. These two congenial spirits recognized each other, and became friendly. So friendly, indeed, that Bill thought it a good opportunity to extract information regarding the whereabouts of Bolker. He was too wise to explain his reason for making these inquiries. "That's a fine gal in the pawn shop, hey?" said he with a leer. "What, Hagar? She's a plum, ain't she? But not for every man's pickin'. Oh, no, not she. Hagar can look arter herself proper," said the landlord. "Does she mind that Shorp all alone?" "Just now she does," replied mine host. "She 'ad a boy, a wicked little 'unchback devil. Bolker's 'is name. But he's hoff, gittin' a wage in West End, as I do 'ear." "West End?" said Bill reflectively. "An' where might 'e 'ang out there?" "Ho, in a swell slap-up bookshop. Juppins, Son and Juppins, Lesser Square way. 'Is parients live down 'ere, but Bolker's that set up with 'is good luck as he looks down on 'em." "Do he now?" said Bill amiably. "I'd twist 'is neck if he was my kid. No more booze, thank'ee. I'm orf to see a pal of mine." The result of this conversation was that Mr. Smith repaired to Leicester Square and loafed up and down the pavement before the bookshop. He saw Bolker several times during the day, for having been told by the landlord that the lad was a hunchback, he had no difficulty recognizing him. Up till the evening he kept a close watch, and when Bolker had put up the shutters and was walking home towards Lambeth, Bill followed him stealthily. All unknowing that he was followed by a black shadow of crime and danger, Bolker paused on Westminster Bridge to admire the red glories of the sunset, then plunged into the network of alleys which make up Lambeth. In a quiet lane by the river he was gripped from behind. A large hand was clapped over his mouth to prevent his crying out, and he was dragged down to a ruined wharf which ran out through green slime into the turbid waters of the stream. "Now then, I've got ye," said his captor in a savage tone. "An' I've got a knife too, ye bloomin' thief. Jest ye answer me strite, or I'll cut your 'ead orf." Bolker gasped with alarm, but not recognizing the threatening face of the man before him, he recovered a little of his native impudence, and began to bluster. "Here now, what do you mean by this? What have I done?" "Done, ye whelp? Opened that doll and prigged them diamonds." "Larky Bill!" cried Bolker, at once recognizing his peril. "Here, let me go." "Not till you give me my property, my diamonds." What property? What diamonds? Oh, you know what I'm drivin' at, cuss you. You're the 'unchback as was in the shorp kep' by that foine gal Hagar. I popped that doll, with diamonds in his innards, and you stole 'em." "I did nothing of the sort. I—" "'Ere, drop yer lies, ye imp. Ye know moy nime, ye did. So ye knows more. Jest look at that knoif. S'elp me, but I'll slip it into ye, ef ye don't tell." He threw the terrified boy across his knee and placed the cold steel at his throat. The rose-red sky spun overhead in the eyes of Bolker, and he thought that his last hour had come. To save himself there was nothing for it but confession. "Wait, wait, I'll tell you," he gasped. "I did take the diamonds." "Ye young cuss," growled Bill, setting the lad on his feet again with a jerk. "An' 'ow did ye know they was inside that himage?" "Monkey told me." Bill started to his feet with an oath, but still kept his grip on Bolker's shoulder to prevent him getting away. "Monkey," he said fiercely. "What did he tell ye?" "Why, that Lady Deacey's diamonds were inside the mandarin." "How did Monkey come to find that doll?" "He got the office from a girl called Eliza, who saw you pawning the toy." "Liz sold me," muttered Bill. "I thought as I saw her on that doy. She mus' have twigged that doll under m' arm, and guessed as I popped it. Gord, I'll deal with 'er laiter, I will. Garn, ye dorg, and tell me the rest," he added, shaking the boy. "There is no more to tell," whimpered Bolker, his teeth chattering. "Monkey couldn't get the mandarin 'cause he had not the ticket. He made friends with me and asked me to steal it. I wouldn't until he told me why he wanted it. Then he said that you had stolen £20,000 worth of diamonds from Lady Deacey's house in Curzon Street and had hidden them in the mandarin. He said we'd go whacks if I'd steal them for him. I couldn't get the mandarin as Hagar's so sharp she would have missed it and put me in jail for stealing it. So I opened the doll and took out the diamonds, which were in a leather bag." "Moy bag, moy diamonds," said Bill savagely. "What did you do with 'em?" "I gave them to Monkey and he cleared out with them. He never gave me a single one, and I don't know where to find him." "I does," growled Mr. Smith, releasing Bolker. "An' I'll find him and slit his bloomin' throat. 'Ere, I say, you come back." For taking advantage of his release, Bolker was racing up the wharf. Bill gave chase as he wanted to obtain further information from the lad, but Bolker knew the neighborhood better than the burglar and soon eluded him in the winding alleys. "It don't matter," said Bill, giving up the chase and wiping his brow. "Monkey's got the swag. Might ha' guessed as he'd round on me. I'll jest see him and Liz, and if I don't make 'em poy for this, my eye." Then he clinched his resolve with an oath, which it is unnecessary to repeat here. After relieving his feelings thus, he went in search of his perfidious friend with murderous thoughts in his heart. At first he thought that it would be difficult to find Monkey. No doubt the man on obtaining the diamonds had gone off to America, north or south, so as to escape the vengeance of his pal. Bill had always been Monkey's pal, and to live comfortably on the fruits of his villainy. Later on the burglar learnt, rather to his surprise, that Monkey was still in London, and still was haunting the thieves' quarter in Whitechapel. Bill wondered at this choice of a residence when the man had so much money in his possession, but he ascribed this longing to Monkey's love for his old haunts and associates. Nevertheless, knowing that Bill was out of prison, it was strange that the man did not look after his skin. "He knows what I am when I'm riz," said Bill to himself as he continued his search, "so he ought to get orf while his throat ain't cut. Blimey, but I'll have a drop of 'is 'art's blood for every one of them bloomin' diamonds." One evening he found Monkey in the parlor of a low public house called the Three Kings, and kept by a Jew of ill fame, who was rather a fence than a landlord. His traitorous friend, more wizened and shriveled up than ever, was seated in a dark corner with an unlighted pipe in his mouth, a half-drained tankard of bitter before him, and his hands thrust moodily into his pockets. If Monkey had the diamonds, his appearance belied their possession, for he looked anything but prosperous. There was no appearance of wealth in his looks or manner, or choice of abode. "What, Bill, old pal," he said, looking up when Mr. Smith hurled himself into the room. "You've got hout of quad." "Yus, I've got hout to slit your throat." "Lor!" whined Monkey, uncomfortably. "What you accusin' me fur? I ain't done nothin', s'elp me." Bill drew a chair before that of Monkey, and taking out his knife played with it in a significant manner. Monkey shrank back before the glitter of the blade and the ugly look in his friend's eyes, but he did not dare to cry out for assistance lest the burglar should pounce on him. "Now look'ee 'ere, Monkey," said Bill with grim determination. "I don't want none of your bloomin' lip, ner his ayther. D'ye see? I've seen that beast of a kid as you put up to steal my diamonds, and—" "Yah, that kid!" cried Monkey with sudden ferocity. "Wish I'd 'im 'ere. I'd squeeze the 'art out of 'im." "What fur? Didn't he get you the swag? Moy swag, cuss ye!" "No, he didn't, and ef he says he did, he's a liar. A bloomin' busted liar, s'elp me! I tell you, Bill, he kept them shiners to himself, cuss him." "That's a damned lie, ye sneakin' dorg," said Bill politely. "My die if 'tain't gorspel truth," yelped Monkey. "Look'ee 'ere, old pal—" "Don't you call me pal," interrupted Bill savagely. "I ain't no pal of yourn, ye terbacker-faced son of a bloomin' 'angman. Liz blew the gaff on me poppin' that himage, and ye tried to git me swag when I was doin' time. And ye did git it, ye—" "I didn't!" snapped Monkey, interrupting in his turn. "The kid stuck to the swag, I tell ye. Course I knowed of them diamonds." "Course ye did," growled William, ironically. "Didn't I tell ye 'ow I cracked that crib in Curzon Street and prigged them diamonds and the himage? Yah, ye cuss!" "I knows ye did, Bill. And ye tole me 'ow ye stowed the swag inside the doll. My high, that was sharp of ye. But ye moight hev trusted a pal." "I didn't know ye popped the doll till Liz told me. She sor ye goin' into that pop shorp with a chiner thing under yer arm, and—" "And you'd set her arter me!" cried Bill savagely. "She didn't git into Lambeth on the chance." "Yus," said Monkey doggedly, "I did put her on yer trail. Ye hid the diamonds in that image and cleared out with it. I couldn't foller meself, so I set Liz onto ye. She tole me as 'ow you'd popped the thing. So when ye was doin' time I tried to git it again, though that young cuss is sold me. Limey, but I've a moind to slit yer throat," said Bill furiously. "What d'ye mean tryin' to collar my swag?" "Why, fur yer own sake, Bill, s'elp me. I thort the gal might fin' out. But ye needn't git up, Bill. I didn't get them diamonds. The boy hes them." "That's a lie, I tell ye." "'Tain't. When I tole the kid about the diamonds, he stole 'em sure, and left the doll so as the pawnshop gal wouldn't fin' out. But I never saw him agin, though I watched the shorp like a bloomin' tyke. The boy cleared out with them diamonds. I wish I'd 'im 'ere. I'd choke the little devil." Bill reflected and slipped the knife into his pocket. Without doubt Monkey was speaking the truth. He was too savagely in earnest to be telling a falsehood. Moreover, if he really possessed the diamonds, he would not remain hard up and miserable in the thieves' quarter of dingy Whitechapel. No, Bolker had kept the jewels and had deceived Monkey. More than that, in the interview on the ruined wharf he had deceived Bill himself. Priding himself on his astuteness, Mr. Smith felt savage at having been sold by a mere boy. "If I can only get him agin," he thought when leaving the Three Kings, "I'll take the 'ead orf him, and chuck his crooked carcass into the river mud." But he found it difficult to lay hands on Bolker, although for more than a week he haunted the shop in Leicester Square, warned by his one experience that Bill was a dangerous person to meddle with. Bolker had given notice to his employers and at present was in hiding. Also, he was arranging a little scheme whereby to rid himself of Larky Bill's inopportunities. Vark was the man who undertook to carry out the details of the scheme, and Hagar was consulted also with regard to its completion. These three people, Vark, Hagar, and Bolker, laid an ingenious trap for unsuspecting Bill, into which he walked without a thought of danger. He had been betrayed by Monkey, by Bolker, by Liz. Now he was going to be sold by Vark the lawyer. Truly the fates were against Bill at this juncture. Vark was a thieves' lawyer, and had something in him of a latter-day Fagin, for he not only made use of criminals when he could do so with safety, but also he sold them to justice when they became dangerous. As he saw a chance of making money out of Bill Smith, he resolved to do so, and sent for the man to visit him at once. As Vark had often done business with the burglar, Bill had no idea that it was in the lawyer's mind to betray him, and duly presented himself at the Spider's office in Lambeth, like a silly fly. The first thing he saw on entering the room was the mandarin swaying on the table. "You are astonished to see that?" said Vark, noticing his surprise. "I dare say, but you see, Bill, I know all about your theft of the Deasy diamonds." "Who tole you?" growled Bill, throwing himself into a chair. "Hagar of the Pawnshop," replied Vark, slowly and with significance. Bill's eyes lighted up fiercely, in precisely the way Vark wished. The lawyer had not forgiven Hagar for refusing to marry him, and for curtailing his pickings in the Dix estate. For these reasons he wished her evil, and if he could inoculate the burglar's heart with a spite towards her, he was bent on doing so. It appeared from Bill's next speech that he had succeeded. "Oh, 'twas that gal, was it?" said Mr. Smith quietly. "I might ha' guessed it, by seein' that himage. Well, I owe 'er one, I do, and I guess I'll owe 'er another. But that's my biz, 'tain't yourn. What d'ye want, ye measly dorg?" he added, looking at the lean form of Vark in a surly manner. "I want to see you about the Deasy diamonds. Why did you not bring them to me when you stole them?" "Whoy? 'Cause I didn't b'lieve in ye," retorted Bill. "I knowed I was in fur toime when I prigged them apples, and I wasn't going to trust my swag to your monkey. Y'd a sold me." "Well, Monkey did sell you." "Yeah, 'e didn't get much on the deal. No, but Bolker did." "Bolker!" echoed Bill, grinding his teeth. "D'ye know that crooked cuss?" "Y' do? Well, see 'ere." Bill drew his clasp knife out of his pocket and opened it. "I'm goin' to slip that into 'im first toime as I claps eyes on 'is ugly mug." "You'd better not, unless you want to be hanged." "What do I care?" growled Bill sulkily. "Scragged or time with skilly and hokum, it's all the sime to me. I suppose you wonder where the diamonds are?" "Yus, I want 'em." "That's a pity," said Vark, with irony, "because I am afraid you won't get them." "Where is them diamonds?" asked Bill, laying his open knife on the table. Vark passed over the question. "I suppose you know that the police are after you for the Deasy robbery?" he said, slipping his hand idly across the table till it was within reach of the knife. "Oh, yes, Lord Deasy offered a reward for the recovery of the jewels. That has been paid, but as you are still at large, the police want you, my friend." "Oh, I ain't afraid of y' givin' me up. I'm too useful to y', I am, and I knows too much about y'. The peelers shan't put me in quod this toime." "Who got the reward?" he asked suddenly. "Bolker got it." "Damn him! Bolker!" "Yes, Monkey made a mistake when he trusted the lad. Bolker thought that he would make more out of honesty than by going shares with Monkey. When he found the jewels, he went off with them to Scotland Yard. Lady Deasy has them now, and Bolker," added Vark, smiling, "has money in the bank. Cuss him! Why didn't I cut his bloomin' throat down by the river?" "That is best known to yourself," replied Vark, who was now playing with the knife. "You are in a tight place, my friend, and may get some years for this robbery." "Yeah, no one knows I did it." "There is the evidence against you," said Vark, pointing to the mandarin. "You stole that out of Lord Deacy's drawing room along with the diamonds. You pawned it, and Hagar can swear that you did so. Bolker can swear that the stolen diamonds were inside. With these two witnesses, my poor Bill, I'm afraid you'd get 6 years or more." "Not me," said Bill, rising. "You won't give me up, and I ain't feared of anyone else." "Why not? There is a reward offered for your apprehension." "What do I care? Who'll get it?" "I will," replied Vark, coolly rising. "You?" Bill recoiled for a moment and sprang forward. "Cuss you! Y'd sell me, y' shark! Gimme my knife!" "Not such a fool, Mr. Smith." Vark threw the knife into a distant corner of the room and leveled a revolver at the bullet head of the advancing burglar. Bill fell back for the moment, fell into the arms of 2 policemen. He gave a roar like a wild beast. "Trapped by—" he yelled, and struggled to get free. The next moment Hagar and Bolker were in the room, and Bill glared at one and the other. "Y' trapped me, damn ye," said he. "Wait till I get out." "You'll kill me, I suppose," said Hagar, scornfully. "No, shan't kill you, nor yet that little devil with a hunch. There's only one cove as I'd swing for, that beastly thief of a lawyer." Vark recoiled before the glare in the man's eyes, and as Bill, foaming and cursing, was hurried out of the room, he looked at Hagar with a nervous smile. "That's bluff," he said feebly. "I don't think so," replied Hagar quietly. "Goodbye, Mr. Vark. I'm afraid you won't live more than 7 years. There will be a funeral about the time of Larky Bill's release." When she went out, Bolker grinned at the lawyer, and with frightful pantomime he drew a stroke across his neck. Vark looked at the clasped knife in the corner and shivered. The mandarin on the table rolled and smiled always. End of chapter 8. Chapter 9 of Hagar of the Pawnshop by Fergus Hume. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The 8th Customer and the Pair of Boots. He was a very little lad, reaching scarcely to the top of the counter, but he had a sharp, keen face, intelligent beyond his years, with the precocity taught by poverty. Hagar, looking at his shock of red hair, and the shrewd blue eyes which peered up at her face, guessed that he was Irish, and when he spoke his brogue proved her guess to be a correct one. She stared at the ragged, barefooted urchin with some amusement, for this was the smallest customer she had yet had. But Mickey, so he gave his name, was quite as sharp as customers of more mature years. In fact, sharper. He bargained astutely with Hagar, and evidently had made up his small mind not to leave the shop until he obtained his own price for the article he was pawning. This was a pair of strong laborer's boots, hobnailed and stout in the soles. The red-haired boy heaved them on to the counter with a mighty clatter, and demanded 7 shillings thereon. "I'll give you 5, said Hagar, after examination. "Ah, now, would ye?" piped the brat, with shrill impudence. "Is it taking the bread out of me mouth ye would be afther? Sure me mother sid 7 bob, and 'tis 7 I want. Where is your mother, boy? Why did she not come herself?" "Mother's comforting herself wid the drink round the carner, and sure I'm aquil to gittin' the dirthy money meself. 7 bob, alannah, and may the hivens be yer bed." "Where did you get these boots?" said Hagar, asking another question and ignoring the persuasive tone of the lad. "I see there are letters marked in nails on the 2 soles." "Ah, there moight be," assented Mickey, complacently. "There's a G on one foot, an' a K on the other. but me father's name is Patrick Dooley, and he's in Ameriky, worse luck. Mother got thim boots 5 days gone in the country. They was a prisint, me darlin', an' as they was too big fur me and me mother, we popped them, dear, for 7 bob. Take 6, said Hagar persuasively. They aren't worth more. Howly saints, listen to the lies of her, shrieked Micky. 6, is it? An' how can I go to me mother wid a shillin' wrong? Sure it's breakin' me hid she'd be afther, wid a quart pot. An' what's money to the loikes av you, me dear? Here, here, take the 7 shillings, said Hagar, anxious to rid herself of this shrieking imp. I'll make out the ticket in the name of Mrs. Dooley. Mrs. Bridget Dooley, of Park Lane, said Micky grandly. Sure that will do as well as any other place. It's on the tramp we are, bad luck to it. If 'twasn't for thim boots we got in Marlow, it's without a copper we'd be. Here, take the ticket and money. I dare say you stole the boots. Is it takin' away me characther ye'd be afther? Stalin'? Wasn't thim boots a prisint to me for pure charity and love of the saints? Ah, well, I'm goin'. 7 bob. It's little enough, anyhow. But what's the use of lookin' for justice to Oireland in the country of the Saxon tyrant? And Micky went out singing The Wearing of the Green in a very shrill and unpleasant voice. Hagar put the boots away, never expecting that a story could be attached to so ordinary a pawned article. But 2 days afterwards she was reading an account of a murder, and, to her surprise, the very boots now reposing on a high shelf in her shop were mentioned as a link in the chain of evidence likely to hang the assassin. Coincidences occur in real life oftener than the world cares to admit, and this was a case in point. A pair of boots with initials on the soles had been pawned in her shop, and now, scarcely 48 hours afterwards, she was reading about them in a newspaper. It was strange, almost incredible, but to quote a trite and well-worn saying, truth is stranger than fiction. Briefly, the history of the crime was as follows. Sir Leslie Crane of Welby Park, Marlow, had been shot by his gamekeeper, George Carus. It seemed that the man was engaged to marry a farmer's daughter, Laura Brunton by name, and Sir Leslie had been paying the girl more attention than was consistent with their respective positions. Carus had remonstrated with the baronet, who had forthwith discharged him. A week later, Crane, having gone out after dinner for a stroll in the park, had been found dead by a pond known as the Queen's Pool, which was some little distance from the gates. Footmarks had been discovered in the soft mud near the water, which showed that the assassin had worn boots marked on the soles with the letters G and K. These had been traced through a Marlow bootmaker to George Carus. The man had been arrested, but neither denied his guilt nor affirmed his innocence. Still, as the report said, there could be no doubt that he had killed Sir Leslie in a fit of jealous rage, and also because he had been discharged. The boots could not be found, so undoubtedly the man had got rid of them after wearing them on the night of the murder. The report in the paper concluded by stating that the dead baronet was succeeded by his cousin, now Sir Lewis Crane. Strange that the boots should have been pawned in London, thought Hagar, when she finished reading this article, and stranger still that they should have been pawned by that Irish lad. On the day he came here, he said the boots had been given to him 5 days previously. It was 2 days since then, so that in all makes 7 days. Today is the 21st of August, so I suppose Carus must have given the boots to Micky on the 14th. Let me see the date of the crime. On examination she found that the murder had been committed on the night of the 12th of August, and that Carus had been arrested on the 13th. Here Hagar came to a full stop and reflected. If Kerris had been in jail on the 14th, as from the report in the paper he undoubtedly was, he could not have given the boots to Micky on that day. Yet the Irish lad had confessed to receiving the boots at Marlow, and had given a time which, as reckoned out by Hagar, corresponded with the 14th of the month. But on that day, the man who owned the boots was under lock and key. There's something wrong here, said Hagar to herself on making this discovery. Perhaps Kerris is innocent in spite of the evidence of the boots. What am I to do? It was difficult to say. Certainly the accused man did not assert his innocence, a fact which was rather astonishing on the face of it. No one would let themselves be hanged for a murder which they did not commit. Yet if Kerris were guilty, he must have had an accomplice. Else how could the boots have been given to the Irish tramp when their owner was in prison? The man, thought Hagar, might be innocent after all, in spite of his strange silence. Still, not knowing all the circumstances of the case, save the garbled and bare report of the newspaper, the girl did not and could not make up her mind in the matter. At the present moment her sole course was to write and state that the boots had been pawned. This Hagar did at once, and the next day received a visit from the detective who had charge of the case. He was called Julf, a lean, tall, dark, and solemn creature who went very cautiously to work, especially in cases of murder. He had a conscience, he said, and would never forgive himself did he hang the wrong criminal. Julf knew how often circumstantial evidence helped to condemn the innocent, how likely even the most acute detective was to be deceived by outward appearances, and how intricate and dark were the paths which led to the discoveries of mysterious crimes. Hence he was slow and circumspect in his dealings. On arriving at the Lambeth pawnshop, he examined the boots, asked Hagar a few questions, and then sat down with her to thresh out the matter. Julf saw that the girl was shrewd and clever from the remarks she had made anent the pawning of the boots, so he was quite willing to discuss the affair freely with her. In contrast to many self-sufficient detectives, Julf always believed that two heads were better than one, especially when the second head was that of a woman. He had a great respect for the instinct of the weaker sex. "I'm afraid the man's guilty right enough," he said in his solemn way. He had quarreled with Sir Leslie over this girl, and had been dismissed for insolence. Besides, he was seen coming out of the park at 10 o'clock, just after the murder. Had he his gun with him? No, but that's no matter. Sir Leslie was shot through the heart with a pistol. Now Kerris had a pistol, but that can't be found either. You didn't have a pistol pawned here, did you? Nothing was pawned but the boots, said Hagar, and Kerris could not have given them to Micky. It seems that he was in prison on the day the lad got them. That is true enough. We must find this boy and learn who gave him the boots on that day. But if Kerris is innocent, why doesn't he say so? It is a mystery, sighed Hagar. You say that Kerris's pistol cannot be found? No, not in his house. So I dare say he flung it away after killing Sir Leslie. "Oh-ho," said Hagar shrewdly. "Then the weapon with which the murder was committed can't be found either." "But the pistol is the same. Kerris used it and then got rid of it. Why don't you search for it? We have searched everywhere, but it cannot be found. Have you drained the pond near which the crime was committed?" "Why, no," said Julf meditatively. "We haven't done that. It's a good idea." Hagar sighed impatiently. "I wish I had this case in my own hands," she said sharply. "I believe I'd find the assassin." "We have found him," replied the detective stolidly. "Kerris killed Sir Leslie." I don't believe it." "Then why doesn't he deny it?" "I can't say. Is Kerris much in love with this Laura Brenton?" asked Hagar, turning her large bright eyes on Julf. "I should think so. He's madly in love with her." "And she with him?" "Oh, I don't say that," replied Julf. "That is quite another thing. I fancy from what I have heard that she gave far too much encouragement to that young baronet. Kerris evidently had cause for jealousy, so I do not wonder he killed Sir Leslie." "You have yet to prove that he did." "Bah!" said Julf, rising to take his leave. "He quarrelled with the baronet. He was discharged, his own pistol is missing, and the dead man was shot with a pistol. Then there is the evidence of the boots with his initials on the soles. You can't get over that. Don't you talk nonsense, my girl. There is a strong case against Kerris." "I can see that, but there is one point in his favor. He did not give those boots to Micky." "Evidently not. But to prove that point we must find the lad." This was easier said than done, for Micky and his mother had disappeared as completely as though the earth had swallowed them up. All the police and detective forces in London tried to find the boy, but could not. Yet on his evidence turned the whole case, and all this time George Kerris, in the Marlow prison, refused to open his mouth. Most people believed him to be guilty on the evidence of the boots, but Hagar, on the evidence of the pawning, insisted that he was innocent. Still, she could not understand why he held his tongue at such a crisis. It has been stated several times that Hagar found her life in the pawnshop extremely dull, and seized every opportunity to gain for herself a little diversion. A chance of amusement in unraveling the mystery of the boots offered itself now, and this she resolved to take. Also, the conduct of the case would necessitate a visit into the country, and weary of the narrow streets of Lambeth, Hagar eagerly desired a breath of fresh air. She left the shop in charge of an elderly man who had been her assistant since Bolker's departure, and took the train to Marlow. When she arrived there, Julf, more solemn than ever, met her at the railway station. "Good day," said he quietly. "You see I have agreed to let you assist me in finding out the truth of this case, though to my mind the truth is already plain enough." "I don't believe it, Mr. Julf. Take my word for it, George Kerris is innocent of the crime." "Is he?" said Julf in skeptical tones. "Then who is guilty?" "That is what I have come to find out," retorted Hagar. "I am obliged to you for letting me help you, though, to be sure, I do so only to gratify my own curiosity. But you won't repent of your concession. I am to have a free hand? You can do exactly as you like." "Can I? Then I shall first call and see the new baronet." Refusing the offer of Julf to accompany her, on the plea that she could execute her business better alone, Hagar walked to Welby Park, which was on the other side of Marlow, and asked to see Sir Lewis Crane. At first, owing to her gypsy-like appearance, she was refused admittance, but on mentioning that her business had to do with the murder of the late baronet, Sir Lewis consented to see her. When face to face with him, Hagar, for reasons of her own, examined him closely. He was an ugly, elderly little creature, many years older than his dead cousin, and had a mean yellow face, stamped with an expression of avarice. Hagar had seen just such another pinched, cunning look on the face of Jacob Dix, and she knew without much trouble that the man before her was a miser. However, she wasted no time in analyzing his character, knowing that it would reveal itself in the forthcoming conversation, but at once mentioned her business. "I am come on the part of Mr. Julf to see about this murder," she said curtly. Sir Lewis raised his eyes. "I did not know that the government employed lady detectives," was his remark. "I am not a detective, but the owner of the shop in which the boots of George Kerris were pawned." "The boots which prove his guilt," said Crane, with an air of relief which did not escape Hagar. "I rather think that they prove his innocence," was her cold reply. "Oh, you are talking about them having been given to that tramp when Kerris was in prison. I know all about that, as the detective told it to me. But all the same, Kerris is guilty, else he would deny his guilt. Have you any idea why he does not do so?" Crane shrugged his shoulders. "No, unless it is that he knows himself to be guilty. I believe him to be innocent." "Pshaw! My cousin admired Laura Brenton, who was engaged to Kerris, and was foolishly attentive to her. On that score the man was insolent, so Leslie discharged him. In committing the murder he took a double revenge. Where were you, Sir Lewis, when your cousin was killed?" "In the park," replied the baronet frankly. "After dinner my cousin and I went out for a stroll. In a short time he made some excuse to leave me, as I believe he wished to meet Laura by the Queen's Pool. I walked in the opposite direction, and shortly afterwards I came back to the house. Leslie had not returned, so I went to look for him, and found his dead body by the pool." "Did you hear the pistol shot?" "Yes, but I paid no attention to it. My cousin was in the habit of firing at a target, and I thought he might be doing so then." "What, firing at a target in the twilight? Could your cousin see in the dark like a cat?" said Hagar with irony. "I don't know anything about that," retorted Crane snappishly. "I have told you the story, as you represent the detective Julf. I say no more." "I don't want you to say more. May I go and look at the pond?" "Certainly. One of the servants shall show it to you." "Can't you come yourself?" said Hagar with a keen glance. Crane drew back, and his yellow face grew pale. "No," said he in an almost inaudible voice. "I have seen enough of that horrible place." "Very good. I'll go with the servant," replied Hagar, and marched towards the door. "What do you want to see the pool for?" he asked, following. "I wish to find the lost pistol." When Hagar had taken her departure, Sir Lewis, pale and nervous, stood near the open window. "Confound this woman!" he thought, clenching his fist. "She is far too clever, but I don't think she'll be quite clever enough to find that pistol," he added in a satisfied tone. The Queen's Pool was a circular sheet of water filled with lilies at the lower end of the park. On the way thereto, Hagar asked the servant who was guiding her a few questions. "Was Sir Lewis poor before he got the estate?" she demanded. "Very poor, miss. Hadn't a sixpence but what he got from Sir Leslie." "Was he on good terms with his cousin?" "No, miss. They was quarreling fearful. On the night of the murder they had a row royal." "What about?" asked Hagar, turning a keen look on the man. "About money and that gal Laura. Sir Lewis loved her just as much as Sir Leslie, but she didn't care a straw for either of them, being taken up with Kerris." "How does she take her lover's arrest?" "Why, miss, she cries and cries, and swears that he is innocent, and talks nonsense." "What kind of nonsense? There may be some sense in it." "I dursn't tell you, miss," said the servant, casting a hurried look round. "It'd be as much as my place is worth." "Oh, I understand," said Hagar serenely. "This Laura says that Sir Lewis killed his cousin." "Yes, she do," replied the man, aghast at her penetration. "But how could you guess, miss, is more—" "Never mind," said Hagar, cutting him short as they arrived at the pool. "Is this the place where the murder was committed?" "Yes, miss. We found the body there in the mud, and just beside it the marks of the boots." Hagar reflected and asked another question. "Did Sir Lewis ever visit Kerris?" "He did, miss, just 2 days afore the murder. Went to see him about some game." "Oh, did he?" murmured Hagar to herself. "I think there was something more than game in that visit." Of this she said nothing to the man who stood on the bank watching her searching about the place. The pool was filled with clear water, and on it the lilies floated placidly. Hagar peered in to see if there was any trace of the pistol used to kill Sir Leslie, but although the water was crystal clear, and she searched carefully, not a sign of the weapon could she see. The grass round the pool was closely shorn, and some little distance up the slope stretched a terrace with a flight of shallow stone steps. On either side of these, at the lower end, were two pillars bearing urns of marble sculptured in classic fashion with nymphs and dancing fauns. In these bloomed scarlet geraniums, now in full flower, and as Hagar, idly gazing around, caught sight of the vivid blossoms, an idea entered her head. Dismissing the man, for whom she had no further use, she moved swiftly towards the terrace, and lifted one of the pots out of its marble urn. No sign of a pistol there, she said, replacing the pot with a sense of disappointment. I may be wrong. Let me examine the other. This time she was rewarded for her shrewd guess. At the bottom of the right-hand urn, quite concealed by the pot, she found a small pistol. On its stock there was a silver plate, and on that plate a name was engraved. At the sight of this latter, the eyes of Hagar glistened with much satisfaction. I thought so, said she to herself, and now to tell Julf. The detective was waiting for her at the park gates, and looked up expectantly as she moved towards him with a smile on her face. With grim satisfaction she placed the pistol in his hand. There is the weapon with which Sir Leslie was killed, she said in a tone of triumph. I found it under the geranium pot in one of those urns. What do you think of that? The pistol of Carus, said Julf, quite amazed. No, not the pistol of Carus, but of the man who murdered Sir Leslie. Carus, repeated Julf with dogged obstinacy. Look at the name on the silver plate, you idiot. Lewis Crane, read the detective, stupefied. Then he looked up with an expression of blank astonishment on his solemn face. What? He muttered. Do you think Sir Lewis killed his cousin? I am sure of it, replied Hagar firmly. I have just learnt from a servant that he was in love with the girl Laura also, and that he was poor and dependent upon the dead man for money. The two had a quarrel on the night of the murder, as they were walking in the park. Because of this quarrel they parted, each going different ways. Sir Lewis said that he returned home, that he heard the pistol shot and thought that his cousin was shooting at a target. As if a man would do so in the twilight, added the girl contemptuously. What he really did, Lewis I mean, was to follow his cousin and shoot him by the Queen's Pool. Then he hid the pistol in the marble urn and crept back to the house to play his comedy. I tell you, Mr. Julf, that Carus is innocent. I said so always. Sir Lewis is the guilty person, and he slew his cousin out of jealousy of Laura Brenton, and because he wanted the dead man's money. But the boots, the footmarks in the mud, stammered Julf, quite confounded by this reasoning. The marks were made by those boots of Carus. I quite believe that, admitted Hagar, another portion of Sir Lewis's very clever scheme to ward off suspicion from himself. The servant who led me to the Queen's Pool will tell you, as he told me, that Sir Lewis just a day or two before the murder paid a visit to the cottage of Carus. Now it is my opinion that while there he stole the boots and wore them on the night on which he committed the murder, with the intention of throwing the blame on Carus, whom Laura Brenton loved. Don't you see what his game was, Mr. Julf? He wanted to gain a title and money, so as to marry Laura. So he slew his cousin to get the first, and laid the blame, by circumstantial evidence, on George Carus to get the second. Now what do you say? It looks black against Sir Lewis, certainly, admitted Julf. Still, I cannot think that he would dare. Bah! Men dare anything to gratify their passions, retorted Hagar shrewdly. Besides, he thought that he made all safe for himself by wearing the boots of Kerris. Oh, if that boy could only be found! He is found, said Julf quickly. I got a telegram while you were in the park. The police picked him up in Whitechapel, and will send him down here tomorrow. If he can swear that Sir Lewis gave him the boots, I shall get a warrant out for that man's arrest. I believe he is guilty, said Hagar in a meditative fashion, and yet I am not altogether sure. Why not? There is certainly a strong case against him. Yes, but why, if Sir Lewis is guilty, should Kerris keep silent and not declare his innocence? I must see the man and find out. Can I get into the jail? I'll take you there myself tomorrow morning, replied Julf. I should like to know the reason of his silence also. It can't be love of Sir Lewis as makes him hold his tongue. No, that is what puzzles me. After all, like Kerris, the baronet may be innocent. Julf shook his head. I can't think where you will find a third party on which to lay the guilt, unless, he added with an afterthought, you blame the Irish boy who pawned the boots. It may be even him, said Hagar seriously, but we'll know tomorrow, I fancy. Kerris, Sir Lewis, Mickey. I wonder which of the three killed that poor young man. Hagar thought over this problem for an hour or so, then, not being able to solve it, she put it out of her head for the night. As for Julf, he was so much impressed by Hagar's cleverness in finding the pistol and constructing a case against Sir Lewis, who he now began to believe was guilty, that the next morning, before taking her to see George Kerris in prison, he conducted her to an outlying farm. Laura Brenton lives here, he said. Ask her about Sir Lewis, and see if we can strengthen the case against him. Laura was a fine, tall, handsome girl, somewhat masculine in her looks, but at the present moment she seemed ill, and appeared haggard, which was no wonder, seeing that one of her lovers was dead and the other in prison. However, she was quite willing to answer Hagar's questions, and declared most emphatically that Kerris was innocent. He wouldn't kill a fly, she said, weeping, although he was angry with me for meeting Sir Leslie. But I never saw any harm in doing so. Opinions differ, said Hagar coldly, not approving of this morality. You met Sir Leslie on the night of the murder? I didn't, stammered the girl fiercely. Who says so? Sir Lewis. He told me that his cousin left him in the park after their quarrel to see you by the Queen's Pool. This Laura denied flatly. I went into Marlow on that evening to buy some ribbon, she explained, but I never went near Welby Park. Sir Lewis is a liar and a murderer. A murderer? Why should he murder his cousin? Asked Hagar sharply. Because he loved me, and I would have nothing to say to him. You loved Sir Leslie? I did not, blazed out the girl wrathfully. I loved neither of them, but only George Kerris. He is innocent, and Sir Lewis is guilty. I believe he killed his cousin with the pistol Sir Leslie gave him. What do you know about that pistol? Why, explained Laura quietly, I went to Welby Park with father to pay the rent, and in the library, on the table, there was a pistol with a silver plate on it. Sir Lewis, he was not the baronet then, told me that Sir Leslie had given it to him and showed him his own name on the plate. As Sir Leslie was shot with a pistol, I believe Sir Lewis did it. But had not George Kerris a pistol also? Yes, an old thing that wouldn't fire straight. I tried it myself at a target which George set up on the farm. The pistol isn't in George's house. I don't know where it is then, said the girl indifferently. But I am sure of one thing, that George is innocent. Oh, try and get him out of jail. And Sir Lewis hanged? Said Hagar dryly. Yes, cried Laura fiercely. He's a murdering beast. I should like to see him dead. Rather wondering at the fierceness of the girl, Hagar left her, and went on to the jail in which Kerris was incarcerated. The gamekeeper was a huge blond man with a fresh, handsome face. Usually his expression was frank and kindly, but now, owing to recent events, he looked sullen. In spite of all Hagar's questioning, he persisted in declining an explanation. "I'll say neither one thing nor another," he declared. "If I did kill Sir Leslie, or I didn't, is my business. Anyhow, he deserved to be killed." "Who are you screening?" asked Hagar, changing her tactics. "No one," replied Kerris, a color rising in his face. "Yes, you are, else you would not jeopardize your neck. But you shall be saved in spite of yourself. I know who killed Sir Leslie." "You do?" asked the man, looking up anxiously. "Yes, his cousin, Sir Lewis. We have found his pistol concealed where the murder took place. He stole your boots to wear them and throw the blame on you. You came out of Welby Park at 10 o'clock, after the murder was committed. Did you not see Sir Lewis?" "No, I didn't," replied Kerris hastily. "I saw no one. I heard a shot, and thought poachers might be about. But as Sir Leslie had discharged me, I didn't think it was my business to see after them." "Sir Lewis paid you a visit shortly before the murder?" "Yes, he did, to see me about some game." "Did you miss the boots after he left?" "I never missed them till the night of the murder, when I wanted to put 'em on," said Kerris. "I hadn't worn them for some days, as they were new boots and rather hurt my feet." "Then no doubt Sir Lewis stole them for his own purposes," said Hagar triumphantly. "He is guilty, and you—" "I am innocent," cried Kerris proudly. "I don't mind saying it now. I never killed Sir Leslie. I never laid a finger on him. And you did not say so before, because you are screening someone. Who is it?" Kerris made no reply, but looked uneasy. Before Hagar could repeat her question, the answer thereto came from a most unexpected quarter. The door of the cell was opened, and Julf entered with an expression of profound astonishment on his face. "Here's a go!" he cried to Hagar. "Micky has arrived and has told me from whom he received the boots." "Sir Lewis?" "No. I have seen Sir Lewis, and he denies his guilt. Also he tells me a story which corroborates Micky's evidence, and explains why Kerris here holds his tongue." Kerris rose from his seat on the bed with a bound and strode towards Julf, looking worried and fierce. "Not a word, not a word," he said between his clenched teeth. "Spare her." "Her?" cried Hagar, a light breaking in on her. "Laura Brenton?" "Yes, Laura Brenton," replied Julf, shaking off the gamekeeper. "Micky has seen her. It was she who gave him the boots." "I told her to, interrupted Kerris in despair. "Nonsense! You wish to screen her, as you have tried to do all along. But you are wrong. Laura Brenton is not worth your sacrificing your life, my man. She is the guilty person who killed Sir Leslie. And why? Because he had cast her off, and was about to marry another woman." Kerris gave a great cry. "It is false, false! She loved me!" "She loved herself," retorted Julf sharply. "Sir Leslie promised to marry her, and because she could not force him to keep that promise, she killed him. It was to throw the blame on you that she stole the boots and wore them on the night she met Sir Leslie by the Queen's Pool. It was to get Sir Lewis into trouble that she stole his pistol to kill his cousin." "And did she hide it in the urn?" asked Hagar, astonished by these revelations. "No, Sir Lewis did that. He knew that Laura committed the crime." "How so?" "He heard the shot and went to see who had fired it. By the Queen's Pool he found his cousin's dead body, and picked up his own pistol on the bank. as Laura, to his knowledge, had taken it away from the library on the day she came with her father to pay rent. He knew that she had killed Sir Leslie. To screen her, and not thinking of his own danger should the pistol with his name on it be found, he hid it in the urn where you found it. So you see, 2 men have tried to screen this woman, who loved neither of them. She loved me, cried Kerris in agony. Oh, why did Sir Lewis speak? To save himself from arrest, replied Julf. He was not so loyal as you, my poor fellow. However, you will soon be released. Today I arrest Laura. And this was done on that very morning. Laura was arrested, and terrified by the statements of Mickey and Sir Lewis. Although George Kerris loyally kept silent, she confessed all. Julf's explanation was correct. She had met Sir Leslie on the night of the murder by the Queen's Pool, with the intention of killing him should he persist in his intention of casting her off. He did so, and she killed him. She had stolen the pistol and the boots to throw the blame, should occasion arise, on Sir Lewis and Kerris. Also, she had taken away the pistol of Kerris from his cottage to inculpate him. But for Hagar and the episode of the pawned boots, which Laura had given to Mickey to get rid of, she might have succeeded in her vile plans, and have escaped free to ruin other men. As it was, she confessed her crime, and was condemned to penal servitude for life. She deserved the scaffold, but she escaped that through the leniency of the jury, on the score of her youth and beauty. Released from the prison into which he had cast himself so madly to save an ungrateful woman, George Kerris came up to Lambeth and redeemed those fatal boots which had been pawned by Mickey. I am going to Australia, he said to Hagar. I failed to save her, so I cannot bear to remain at Marlow. I knew she was guilty all along, for she had been in my cottage the day previous to the murder, and had carried off these boots, on the plea that her father wished for a similar pair and wanted to see them. When the footmarks with my initials were traced in the mud of the pond, I guessed that she had worn the boots and had killed Sir Leslie. I loved her so dearly that I would have suffered in her place. But you, with your clear head, found her out, and now she is paying for her wickedness. Life is over for me here. I go to Australia, and I shall take these boots which ruined her with me. Why did you do all this for Laura, that worthless woman? Worthless she is, I know, rejoined Kerris, but I loved her. And with a nod he departed, carrying the boots and himself into exile. End of chapter 9. Chapter 10 of Hagar of the Pawnshop by Fergus Hume. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The 9th Customer and the Casket. Hagar had almost a genius for reading people's characters in their faces. The curve of the mouth, the glance of the eyes, she could interpret these truly, for to her feminine instinct she added a logical judgment masculine in its discretion. She was rarely wrong when she exercised this faculty, and in the many customers who entered the Lambeth pawnshop she had ample opportunities to use her talent. To the sleek white-faced creature who brought for pawning the Renaissance casket of silver she took an instant and violent dislike. Subsequent events proved that she was right in doing so. The 9th customer, as she called him, was an oily scoundrel. In appearance he was a respectable servant, a valet or a butler, and wore an immaculate suit of black broadcloth. His face was as white as that of a corpse, and almost as expressionless. 2 tufts of whisker adorned his lean cheeks, but his thin mouth and receding chin were uncovered with hair. On his badly shaped head and off his low narrow forehead, the scanty hair of iron gray was brushed smoothly. He dropped his shifty gray eyes when he addressed Hagar, and talked softly in a most deferential manner. Hagar guessed him to be a West End servant, and by his physiognomy she knew him to be a scoundrel. This gentleman's gentleman, as Hagar guessed him rightly to be, gave the name of Julian Peters and the address 42 Mount Street, Mayfair. As certainly as though she had been in the creature's confidence, Hagar knew that name and address were false. Also, she was not quite sure whether he had come honestly by the casket which he wished to pawn, although the story he told was a very fair and apparently candid one. "My late master, miss, left me this box as a legacy," he said deferentially, "and I have kept it by me for some time. Unfortunately, I am now out of a situation, and to keep myself going until I obtain a new one, I need money. You will understand, miss, that it is only necessity which makes me pawn this box. I want £15 on it." "You can have 13, said Hagar, pricing the box at a glance. "Oh, indeed, miss, I am sure it is worth 15, said Mr. Peters, so called. "If you look at the workmanship." "I have looked at everything," replied Hagar promptly. "At the silver, the workmanship, the date, and all the rest of it." "The date, miss?" asked the man in a puzzled tone. "Yes, the casket is Cinquecento, Florentine work. I dare say if you took it to a West End jeweler you could get more on it than I am prepared to lend. £13 is my limit." "I'll take it," said Peters promptly. "I don't care about pawning it in the West End, where I am known." As a scoundrel, no doubt, thought Hagar, cynically. However, it was not her place to spoil a good bargain, and getting the Renaissance casket for £13 was a very good one. So she made out the ticket in the false name of Julian Peters, and handed it to him, together with a £10 note and 3 sovereigns. The man counted the money, with a greedy look in his eyes, and turned to depart with a cringing bow. At the door of the shop he paused, however, to address a last word to Hagar. "I can redeem that casket whenever I like, miss?" he asked anxiously. "Tomorrow, if it pleases you," replied Hagar coldly, "so long as you pay me a month's interest for the loan of the money." "Thank you, miss. I shall take back the box in a month's time. In the meantime, I leave it in your charge, miss, and wish you a very good day." Hagar gave a shudder of disgust as he left the shop, for the man to her was a noxious thing, like a snake or a toad. If instinct were worth anything, she felt that this valet was a thief and a scoundrel who was abusing the trust his employer placed in him. The casket was far more likely to have been thieved than to have come to Mr. Peters by will. It is not usual for gentlemen to leave their servants legacies of Cinquecento caskets. The box, as Peters called it, was very beautiful, an exquisite example of goldsmith's art, worthy of Benvenuto Cellini himself. Probably it was by one of his pupils. Renaissance work, certainly, for in its ornamentation there was visible that mingling of Christianity and paganism, which is so striking a characteristic of the rebirth of the arts in the Italy of Dante and the Medici. On the sides of the casket in relief there were figures of dancing nymph and piping satyr, flower-wreathed altar and vine-crowned priest. On the lid a full-length figure of the Virgin with upraised hands. Below, clouds and the turrets of a castle. Overhead, the glory of the Holy Ghost in the form of a wide-winged dove, and fluttering cherubs and grave saints. Within, the casket was lined with dead gold, smooth and lustreless, but this receptacle contained nothing. Without doubt, this tiny gem of goldsmith's art had been the jewel case of some Florentine lady in that dead and gone century. Perhaps for her some lover had ordered it to be made, with its odd mingling of cross and thyrsus, its hints of asceticism and joyous life. But the Florentine beauty was now dust, all her days of love and vanity and sin were over, and the casket in which she had stored her jewels lay in a dingy London pawnshop. There was something ironic in the fate meted out by time and chance to this dainty trifle of luxury. While examining the box, Hagar noticed that the gold plate of the case within was raised some little distance above the outside portion. There appeared to her shrewd eyes to be a space between the base of the casket and the inner box of gold. Ever on the alert to discover mysteries, Hagar believed that in this toy there was a secret drawer, which no doubt opened by a concealed spring. At once she set to work searching for this spring. "It is very cleverly hidden," she murmured, having been baffled for a long time. "But a secret recess there is, and I intend to find it. Who knows but what I may stumble on the evidence of some old Florentine tragedy, like that of the Crucifix of Fiesole." Her fingers were slender and nimble, and had a wonderfully delicate sense of feeling in their narrow tips. She ran them lightly over the raised work of beaten silver, pressing the laughing heads of the fauns and nymphs. For some time she was unsuccessful, until by chance she touched a delicately modeled rose, which was carven on the central altar of one side. At once there was a slight click, and the silver slab with its sculptured figures fell downward on a hinge. As she had surmised, the box was divided within into two unequal portions. The upper one, visible when the ordinary lid was lifted, was empty, as has been said, but in the narrowness of the lower receptacle, between the false and the real bottoms of the box, there was a slim packet. Pleased with her discovery, which certainly did credit to her acute intelligence, Hagar drew out the papers. "Here is my Florentine tragedy," said she with glee, and proceeded to examine her treasure trove. It did not take her long to discover that the letters, for they were letters, 5 or 6, tied up with rose-hued ribbon, were not 15th century but very late 19th, that they were not written in Italian but in English, penned in graceful female handwriting upon scented paper. A perfume of violets clung to them still. These letters were full of passionate and undisciplined love. Hagar only read one, but it was sufficient to see that she had stumbled upon an intrigue between a married woman and a man. No address was given, as each letter began unexpectedly with words of fire and adoration, continuing in such style from beginning to end, where the signature appended was Beatrice. In the first one, which Hagar read, and which was a sample of the rest, the writer lamented her marriage, raged that she was bound to a dull husband, and called upon her dearest Paul, evidently the inamorato's name, to deliver her. The passion, the fierce sensual love which burnt in every line of this married woman's epistles, disgusted Hagar not a little. Her pure and virginal soul shrank back from the abyss revealed by this lustful adoration, trembled at the glance it obtained of a hidden life. There was indeed no tragedy in these letters as yet, but it might be, with such a woman as she who had penned them, that they would become the prelude to one. In every line there was divorce. "What a liar that valet is," thought Hagar as she tied the letters up again. "This casket was left to him as a legacy, was it? As if a man would entrust such compromising letters to the discretion of a scoundrel like Peters. No, no, I am sure he doesn't know of this secret place, or of the existence of these letters. He stole this casket from his master, and did not know that it was used to hide these epistles from a married woman. I'll keep the casket safely, and see what comes of it when Mr. Peters returns." But she did not put the letters back in their secret recess. It might be that the valet would return before the conclusion of the month, and if she were out of the shop at the time, her assistant would give back the casket. Hagar felt that it would be wrong to let the letters get into the hands of so unscrupulous a scoundrel as she believed Peters to be. Did he find out the secret of the hiding place and the letters were within, he was quite capable of making capital out of them at the expense of the unhappy woman or his own master. He had the face of a blackmailer. So Hagar reclosed the casket and put away the letters in the big safe in the parlor. She is a light woman, a bad woman, she thought, thinking of that Beatrice who had written those glowing letters, and deserves punishment for having deceived her husband. But I won't give her into the power of that reptile. He would only fatten on her agony. If he comes back for the casket, he shall have it, but without those letters. Hagar did not think for a moment that Peters knew of the existence of these epistles, else in place of pawning the box he would have levied blackmail on the wretched Beatrice or her lover. But when in 2 weeks, long before the conclusion of the month, the valet again appeared, he showed Hagar very plainly that he had learnt the secret in the meantime. How and from whom he had learnt it, Hagar forced him to explain. She was able to do this, as he wanted back the casket, yet had not the money to redeem it. The circumstance gave her a power over the man which she exercised mercilessly, and for some time, playing with him in cat-and-mouse fashion, she pretended to misunderstand his errand. But at first sight she saw from his greedy eyes and the triumphant look on his face that he was bent on some knavery. "I wish to look at my box, if you please, miss," said he on first entering the shop. "I cannot redeem it as yet, but if you would permit me to examine it, I—" "Certainly," said Hagar, cutting him short. She had no patience with his flowery periods. "Here is the box. Look at it as long as you please." Peters seized the casket eagerly, opened it, and looked into the empty space within. Then he shook it, and turned it upside down as though he expected the inner box to fall out. In a moment Hagar guessed that he had become aware, since pawning the casket, that it contained a secret receptacle, and was looking for the same. With an ironic smile she watched him fingering the delicate carvings with his clumsy hands, and saw that with such coarse handling the casket would never yield up its secret. She therefore revealed it to him, not for his satisfaction, but because she wanted to know the history of the love letters. For these, without doubt, the creature was looking, and Hagar congratulated herself that she had obeyed her instinct and had placed the letters beyond his reach. "You can't find it, I see," she observed, as Peter put down the casket in disgust. "Find what?" he asked, with a certain challenge in his regard. "The secret drawer for which you are looking." "How do you know that I look for a secret drawer, miss?" "I can guess as much from the persistent way in which you press the sides of that box. Your late master, who left you the casket as a legacy, evidently did not explain its secrets. But if you wish to know, look here." Hagar picked up the box deftly, touched the altar rose with a light finger, and revealed to Mr. Peters the secret recess. His face fell, as she knew it would, at the sight of the vacant space. "Why, it's empty," he said aloud in a chagrined tone. I thought—" "That you would find some letters within," interrupted Hagar smartly. "No doubt. But you see, Mr. Peters, if that is your name, I happen to have anticipated you." "What? You have found the letters?" "Yes, a neat little bundle of them, which lies in my safe." "Please give them to me," said the man, with tremulous eagerness. "Give them to you?" repeated Hagar contemptuously. "Not I. It is not my business to encourage blackmailing." "But they are my letters," cried Peters, getting red, but not denying the imputation of blackmailing. "You cannot keep my letters." "Yes, I can," retorted Hagar, putting the box on the shelf behind her, "in the same way that I can keep this casket if I so choose." "How dare you?" said the man, losing all his suavity. "The box is mine." It is your master's, you mean, and the letters also. You stole the casket to get money, and now you would steal the letters if you could, to extort money from a woman. Do you know what you are, Mr. Peters? You are a scoundrel." Peters could hardly speak for rage, but when he did find his voice, it was to threaten Hagar with the police. At this she laughed contemptuously. "The police?" she echoed. "Are you out of your mind? Call a policeman if you dare, and I give you in charge for thieving that box." "You cannot. You do not know my master's name." "Do I not?" retorted Hagar, playing a game of bluff. "You forget that the name and address of your master are in those letters." Seeing that he was baffled in this direction, the man changed his high tone for one of diplomacy. He became cringing and wheedling, and infinitely more obnoxious than before. Hagar could hardly listen to his vile propositions with calmness, but she did so advisedly, as she wished to know the story of the letters, the name of the woman who had written them, and that of the man, Peter's master, to whom they had been sent. But the task was disagreeable and required a great deal of self-restraint. "Why not share the money with me?" said Peters in silky tones. "Those letters are worth a great deal. If you let me have them, I can sell them at a high price either to my master or to the lady who wrote them." "No doubt," replied Hagar with apparent acquiescence, "but before I agree to your proposal, I must know the story." "Certainly, miss. I shall tell it to you. "One moment," interrupted Hagar. "Is Peters your real name?" "Yes, miss, but the address I gave was false, also the Christian name I gave you. I am John Peters of Duke Street, St. James, in the employment of Lord Averley." "Are you his valet?" "Yes, I have been with him for a long time, but I lost some money at cards a week or two ago, so So you stole this casket," finished Hagar sharply. "No, miss, I didn't," replied Peters with great dignity. "I borrowed it from my lord's room for a few weeks to get money on it. I intended to redeem and replace it within the month. I shall certainly do so if our scheme with these letters turns out successful." Hagar could scarcely restrain herself from an outbreak when she heard this wretch so coolly discuss the use he intended to make of the profits to be derived from his villainy. However, she kept herself calm, and proceeded to ask further questions with a view of gaining his entire confidence. "Well, Mr. Peters, we will say you borrowed it," she remarked ironically. "But don't you think that was rather a dangerous proceeding?" "I didn't at the time," said Peters ruefully, "as I didn't know my lord kept letters in it. I did not fancy he would ask after it. However, he did ask 2 days ago, and found that it was lost." "Did he think you had taken it?" "Lord bless you, no," grinned the valet. "I ain't quite such a fool as to be caught like that. My lord's rooms have been done up lately, so he thought as perhaps the paper-hangers or some of that low lot stole the box." "In that case you are safe enough," said Hagar, enraged at the ingenious villainy of the creature. "But how did you come to learn that there were letters hidden in this box? You didn't know of them when you pawned it." "No, miss, I didn't," confessed Peters regretfully. "But yesterday I heard my lord say to a friend of his that there were letters to him from a married lady in the secret place of the box, so I thought—" "That you would find the secret place and use the letters to get money out of the married lady." "Yes, I did. That's what we are going to do, ain't it?" "Is the married lady rich?" asked Hagar, answering the question by asking another. "Lor, miss, her husband, Mr. Delamere, has no end of money. She'd give anything to get those letters back. Why, if her husband saw them he would divorce her for sure. He's a proud man, is Delamere." "Has he any suspicion of an intrigue between his wife and Lord Averley?" "Not he, miss. He'd stop it if he had." "Oh, you may be sure she'll give a long price for those letters." "No doubt," assented Hagar. "Well, Mr. Peters, as I am your partner in this very admirable scheme, You had better let me see Mrs. Delamere. I'll get more out of her than you would." "I dare say, miss, you're a sharp one, you are. But you'll go shares fair." "Oh, yes, if I get a good sum you shall have half," replied Hagar ambiguously. "But where does Mrs. Delamere live?" "In Curzon Street, miss. The house painted a light red. You'll always find her in now about 7. Squeeze her for all she is worth, miss. We've got a good thing on in this business." "It would seem so," replied Hagar coolly. "But if I were you, Mr. Peters, I would redeem this casket as soon as I could. You may get into trouble else." "I'll take the money out of my share of the cash," said the scoundrel. "Don't you take less than 500, miss. Those letters are worth it." "Be content. I'll see to all that. Tomorrow I shall interview Mrs. Delamere, so if you come and see me the day after, I will tell you the result of my visit." "Oh, there can only be one result with a sharp one like you," grinned Peters. "You squeeze Mrs. Delamere like an orange, miss. Say you'll tell her husband, and she'll pay anything. Good day, miss. My stars, you're a sharp girl. Good day." Mr. Peters departed with this compliment, just in time to stop Hagar from an unholy desire to throw the casket at his head. The man was a greater scoundrel even than she had thought, and she trembled to think of how he would have extorted money from Mrs. Delamere had he obtained the letters. Luckily for that lady, her foolish epistles were in the hands of a woman far more honorable than herself. Although untitled, Mrs. Delamere was a very great lady. Certainly she was a beautiful one, and many years younger than her lord and master. Mr. Delamere was a wealthy commoner, with a long pedigree and an overweening pride. Immersed in politics and blue books, he permitted his frivolous and youthful wife to do as she pleased, provided she did not drag his name in the mud. He would have forgiven her anything but that. She could be as extravagant as she pleased, gratify all her costly whims, and flirt, if she so chose, and she did choose, with 50 men. But if once the name of Delamere was whispered about in connection with a scandal, she knew well that her husband would seek either a separation or a divorce. Yet with all this knowledge, pretty, silly Mrs. Delamere was foolish enough to intrigue with Lord Averley, and to write him compromising letters. She never thought of danger. Averley was a gentleman, a man of honor, and he had told her a dozen times that he always burnt the letters she wrote him. It was therefore a matter of amazement to Mrs. Delamere when a gypsy-like girl called to see her with a sealed envelope, and mentioned that such envelope contained her letters to Averley. "Letters? Letters?" said Mrs. Delamere, brushing her fluffy yellow curls off her forehead. "What do you mean?" "I mean that your letters to Lord Averley are in this envelope," replied Hagar, looking coldly at the dainty doll before her. "I mean also that did your husband see them he would divorce you." Mrs. Delamere turned pale under her rouge. "Who are you?" she gasped, her blue eyes dilating with terror. "My name is Hagar Stanley. I am a gypsy girl, and I keep a pawn shop in Lambeth." "A pawn shop? How did you get my letters?" "The valet of Lord Averley pawned a silver box in which they were concealed," explained Hagar. "He intended to use them as a means to extort money from you. However, I obtained the letters before he did, and I came instead of him." "To extort money also, I suppose?" For the life of her, Mrs. Delamere could not help making the remark. She knew that she was speaking falsely, that this girl with the grave, dark, poetic face was not the kind of woman to blackmail an erring sister. Still the guilty little creature saw that Hagar, this girl from a pawn shop of the slums, was sitting in judgment upon her, and already in her own mind condemned her frivolous conduct. Proud and haughty Mrs. Delamere writhed at the look on the face of her visitor, and terrified as she was at the abyss which she saw opening at her feet, She could not help making a slighting remark to gall the woman who came to save her. She said it on the impulse of the moment, and impulse had cost her dearly many a time. But that Hagar was a noble woman it would have cost the frivolous beauty dearly now. No, Mrs. Delamere, replied Hagar, keeping her temper, for really this weak little creature was not worth anger. I do not wish for money. I came to return you these letters, and I should advise you to destroy them. I shall certainly do that, said the fashionable lady, seizing the envelope held out to her. But you must let me reward you. As you would reward anyone who returned you a lost jewel, retorted the gypsy with curling lip. No, thank you. What I have done for you, Mrs. Delamere, is above any reward. Above any reward? Stammered the other, wondering if she heard aright. I think so, responded Hagar gravely. I have saved your honor. Saved my honor? Cried Mrs. Delamere furiously. How dare you? How dare you? I dare because I happen to have read one of those letters. I read only one, but I have no doubt that it is a sample of the others. If Mr. Delamere read what I did, I am afraid you would have to go through the divorce court with Lord Averley as correspondent. You are mistaken, stammered Mrs. Delamere, drawn into defending herself. There is nothing wrong between us. I swear. It is no use to lie to me, said Hagar curtly. I have seen what you said to the man. That is enough. However, I have no call to judge you. I came to give you the letters. You hold them in your hand, so I go. Wait! You have been very good. Surely a little money— I am no blackmailer, cried Hagar wrathfully, but I have saved you from one. Had Lord Averley's valet become possessed of those letters, you would have had to pay thousands of pounds for them. I know, whimpered the foolish little woman. You have been good and kind. You have saved me. Take this ring as— No, I want no gifts from you, said Hagar, going to the door. Why not? Why not? Hagar looked back with a glance of immeasurable contempt. I take nothing from a woman who betrays her husband, she said tranquilly. Good night, Mrs. Delamere, and be careful how you write letters to your next lover. He may have a valet also. And Hagar left the magnificent room with Mrs. Delamere standing in it, white with rage and terror and humiliation. In those few contemptuous words of the poor gypsy girl, her sin had come home to her. Hagar had come to the West End to see the woman who had written the letters. Now she walked back to her Lambeth pawnshop to interview the man to whom they had been sent. She was not a girl who did things by halves, and bent upon thwarting in every way the scoundrelism of John Peters. She had sent a message to his master. In reply, Lord Averley had informed her that he would call on her at the time and place mentioned in her letter. The time was 9 o'clock, the place the dingy parlor of the pawnshop. And here Hagar intended to inform Lord Averley of the way in which she had saved Mrs. Delamere from the greed of the valet. Also she intended to make him take back the casket, and repay the money lent on it. In all her dabblings in romance, Hagar never forgot that she was a woman of business, and was bound to get as much money as possible for the heir of the old miser who had fed and sheltered her when she had come a fugitive to London. Hagar's ethics would have been quite incomprehensible to the majority of mankind. True to the hour, Lord Averley made his appearance in Carby's Crescent, and was admitted by Hagar to the back parlor. He was a tall, slender, fair man, no longer in his first youth, with a colorless face which was marked by a somewhat tired expression. He looked a trifle surprised at the sight of Hagar's rich beauty, having expected to find an old hag in charge of a pawnshop. However, he made no comment, but bowed gravely to the girl, and took the seat she offered to him. In the light of the lamp, Hagar looked long and earnestly at this handsome face. There was a look of intellect on it which made her wonder how he could have found satisfaction in the love of a frivolous doll like Mrs. Delamere. But Hagar quite forgot for the moment that the fullest delight of life lies in contrast. "I have no doubt you wondered at receiving a letter from a pawn shop," she said abruptly. "I confess I did," he replied quietly, "but because you mentioned that you had my casket, I came. It is here, you say?" Hagar took the silver box off a near shelf and placed it on the table before him. "It was pawned here 2 weeks ago," she said quietly. "I lent £13, so if you give me that sum and a month's interest, you can have it." Without a word Lord Averley counted out the £13, but he had to ask her what the interest was. Hagar told him, and in a few moments the transaction was concluded. Then Averley spoke. "How did you know it was my casket?" "The man who pawned it told me so." "That was strange." "Not at all, my lord. I made him tell me." You look clever," said Averley, looking at her with interest. "May I ask the name of the man who pawned it?" "Certainly. He was your valet, John Peters." "Peters!" echoed her visitor. "Oh, you must be mistaken. Peters is an honest man." "He is a scoundrel and a thief, Lord Averley, and but for me he would have been a blackmailer." "A blackmailer?" "Yes. There were letters in that casket." "Were letters?" said Averley hurriedly, and drew the box towards him. "Do you know the secret?" "Yes, I found the secret recess and the letters. It was lucky for you that I did so. Your indiscreet speech to a friend informed Peters that compromising letters were hidden in the casket. He came here to find them, but I had already removed them." "And where are they now?" "I gave them back to the married woman who wrote them." "How did you know who wrote them?" asked Lord Averley, raising his eyebrows. "I read one of the letters, and then Peters told me the name of the lady. He proposed to me to blackmail her. I ostensibly agreed, and went to see the lady, to whom I gave back the letters. I asked you here tonight to return the casket, also to put you on your guard against John Peters. He is coming to see me tomorrow to get, as he thinks, the money obtained by means of the letters. That is the whole story." "It's a queer one," replied Averley, smiling. "I shall certainly discharge Peters, but I won't prosecute him for thieving. He knows about the letters, and they are far too dangerous to be brought into court." "They are not dangerous now, my lord. I have given them back to the woman who wrote them." "That was very good of you," said Averley satirically. "May I ask the name of the lady?" "Surely you know. Mrs. Delamere." Averley looked aghast for a moment, and then began to laugh quietly. "My dear young lady," he said, as soon as he could bring his mirth within bounds, "would it not have been better to have consulted me before giving back those letters?" "No," said Hagar boldly, "for you might not have handed them over." "Certainly I should not have handed them to Mrs. Delamere," said Averley, with a fresh burst of laughter. "Why not?" "Because she never wrote them. My dear lady, I burnt all the letters I got from Mrs. Delamere, and I told her I had done so. The letters in this casket, signed Beatrice, were from a different lady altogether. I shall have to see Mrs. Delamere. She'll never forgive me. Oh, what a comedy!" And he began laughing again. Hagar was annoyed. She had acted for the best, no doubt, but she had given the letters to the wrong woman. Shortly the humor of the mistake struck her also, and she laughed in concert with Lord Averley. "I'm sorry I made a mistake," she said at length. "You couldn't help it," replied Averley, rising. "It was that scoundrel Peters who put you wrong. But I'll discharge him tomorrow, and get those letters of Beatrice back from Mrs. Delamere." "And you'll leave that poor little woman alone?" said Hagar as she escorted him to the door. "My dear lady, now that Mrs. Delamere has read those letters, she'll leave me alone, severely. She'll never forgive me. Good night. Oh me, what a comedy!" Lord Aberley went off, casket and all. Peters never came back to get his share of the blackmail, so Hagar supposed he had learnt from his master what she had done. As to Mrs. Delamere, Hagar often wondered what she said when she read those letters signed Beatrice, but only Lord Aberley could have told her that. And Hagar never saw him again, nor did she ever see Peters the blackmailer. Finally, she never set eyes again on the 500 Florentine casket, which had contained the love letters of the wrong woman. End of chapter 10. Chapter 11 of Hagar of the Pawnshop by Fergus Hume. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The 10th Customer and the Persian Ring. One of the last customers of any note who came to the Lambeth pawnshop was a slender, wiry man with an oriental face not unlike that of Hagar herself. His countenance was oval, his nose aquiline in shape, and he possessed 2 dark, sparkling eyes, also a long black beard, well trimmed and well kept. In fact, this beard was the neatest thing about him, as his dress, a European garb, was miserably poor, and the purple-hued cloth which he had twisted round his head for a turban was worn and soiled. He was nevertheless a striking figure when he presented himself before Hagar, and she examined him with particular interest. There was a gypsy look about the 10th customer, which seemed to stamp him as one of the gentle Romany. Even keen-eyed Hagar was deceived. "Are you of our people?" she asked abruptly, after looking at him for a moment or so. "I do not understand," replied the man, in very good English, but with a foreign accent, "what people you speak of." "The Romany, the gypsy tribes." "No, lady, I know of dem. I know what they are. Oh, yes, they in my own country as in dis." "Where is your country?" demanded Hagar, vexed at her mistake. "Iran, what you call Persia," replied the customer. "My name, lady, is Ali. I come from Ispahan these 2 years. Oh, yes, a long time I do stop in dis town." "A Persian," said Hagar, looking at his swarthy face and delicate features. "I don't think I ever saw a Persian before. You are very like one of the Romany, not at all like a Gentile." "Lady, I no Gentile. I no Christian. I am follower ob de Prophet. May his name be blessed. But dis not what I do come to speak," he added with some impatience. "You give money on ring, eh?" "Let me see the ring first," said Hagar diplomatically. Ali, as he called himself, slipped the ring in question off one of his slender brown fingers, and handed it to her in silence. It was a band of dead gold, rather broad, and set in it was an oval turquoise of azure hue, marked with Arabic letters in gold. The ring had the look of a talisman or amulet, as the queer hieroglyphics on the stone seemed the words of some charm, stamped thereon to avert evil. Hagar examined the ring carefully, as she had never seen one like it before. "It is a queer stone," she said, after looking through a magnifying glass at the turquoise. "What do you want on it?" £1, replied Ali promptly. "Just for 2-3 days." "Eh, what? You give me dat?" "Oh, yes, I think the ring is worth 5 times as much. Here is the money. I'll make out the ticket in your name of Ali. How do you spell it?" The Persian took the ticket from Hagar, and in very fair English letters wrote down his name and address. Then with a bow he turned to leave the shop. But before he reached the door she called him back. "I say, Ali, what do these gold marks on this stone mean?" "Dey Arabic letters, lady. Dey spell against de jinns. In de name of Allah, de All-Merciful. Dat what dem letters say." "They say a good deal with a word or two," muttered Hagar. "Arabic must be something like shorthand." "When do you want back the ring?" she asked aloud. "In 2-3 days," replied the Persian. "Say dis week. Yes. Good night, lady. You keep dat ring all right. Yes, so." Ali took himself out of the shop with another bow, and Hagar, after a further examination of the queer ring with its talismanic inscription, put it away on a tray with other jewels. She wondered very much if it had a story attached to it, and having read the Arabian Nights of late, she compared it in her own mind to the ring of Aladdin. It looked like a jewel with a history, did that inscribed turquoise. In the afternoon of the next day, another Persian arrived. Hagar recognized him as such from his resemblance to Ali. Indeed, but for the difference in expression, the two men might have passed for twins. Ali had a soft look in his eyes, a melancholy twist to his mouth, while this countryman of his had a hawk-like and dangerous fierceness stamped on his lean face. He was dressed similarly to Ali, but wore a yellow turban instead of a purple one, and gave his name to Hagar as Mohammed. Also he took out of his pocket the pawn ticket, which he handed to the girl. "Ali, my countryman, he send dis," said he, in broken but very fair English. "He want de ring which he leave here." "Why doesn't he come for it himself?" asked Hagar suspiciously. "Ali ill. Him very bad. He ask me to get de ring. But if you no give me, why, I tell Ali he come himself den." "Oh, there is no necessity for him to do so," replied Hagar, getting the ring. "You would not have the ticket with you if everything was not square. Here is Ali's property, £1 and interest. Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. By the way, you are a friend of Ali?" "Yis, I come to dis place when he come," replied Mohammed passively. "Him very great fren of me. 2 years we in dis land." "Both of you speak English very well." "Tank you, yes. We learn our Inglees in Persia for long time, and when we hear we spike always, always. Good day. I do take dis to Ali." "I say," called out Hagar, "has that ring a story?" "What dis? I no know. Him charm against de jinn, but dat's all. Good day. I go queek to Ali. Good day." He went away with the ring on his finger, leaving Hagar disappointed that the strange jewel with its golden letters had not some wild tale attached to it. However, the ring was gone, and she never expected to hear anything more of it, or of the two Persians. A week passed, and no Ali made his appearance, so Hagar concluded that everything was right, and that he had really sent Mohammed to redeem the ring. On the 8th day of its redemption she was undeceived, for Ali himself made his appearance in the shop. Hagar was surprised to see him. The poor man looked ill, and his brown face was terribly lean and worn in its looks. An expression of anxiety lurked in his soft black eyes, and he could hardly command his voice as he asked her to give him the ring. The request was so unexpected that Hagar could only stare at him in silence. It was a moment or so before she could find words. "The ring!" she said in tones of astonishment. "Why, you have it. Did not your friend Mohammed give it?" "Mohammed!" cried Ali, clenching his hands, and the next moment he had fallen insensible on the outer floor of the shop. The single mention of the name Mohammed in connection with the ring had stricken the poor Persian to the heart. His entrance, his behavior, his fainting, all three were unexpected and inexplicable. Recovering from her first surprise, Hagar ran to the assistance of the fallen man. He was soon revived by the application of cold water, and when he could rise, Hagar, like the good Samaritan she was, conducted him into the back parlor and made him lie down on the sofa. But more than ordinary weakness was the matter with the man. He was suffering from want of food, and told Hagar faintly that he had eaten nothing for 2 days. At once the girl set victuals before him and warmed some soup to nourish him. Ali ate sparingly but well, and although he refused to touch wine as a follower of the Prophet, he soon became stronger and more cheerful. His gratitude to Hagar knew no bounds. You are as charitable as Fatima, the daughter of our Lord Mohammed, said he gratefully, and your good deed, it will be talked of by the angel Gabriel on de last day. How is it you are so poor? Asked Hagar, restive under this praise. Ah, lady, that is one big long story. Connected with the ring? Yes, that ring would have made me rich, replied the Persian with a sigh. But now dat wicked one will get my monies. Ha, said Ali furiously, dat Mohammed is the son of a burnt father. He is a scoundrel, certainly. How did he get the pawn ticket? He took it away when I ill. Why did he want the ring? Ali reflected for a moment, and then he evidently made up his mind what course to pursue. I will tell you, lady, he said, looking with thankful eyes at Hagar. You have been good to me. I will tell you the story of my life, of the ring. I knew that ring had some story connected with it, said Hagar complacently. Go on, Ali, I am all attention. The Persian obeyed forthwith, but as his English was imperfect at times, it will be as well to set forth the story in the vernacular. Being still weak, it took Ali some time to tell the whole tale, but Hagar heard him patiently to the end. His narrative was not without interest. I was born in Isfahan, said the Persian in his grave voice, and I am a Mirza, what you call here a prince in my own country. My father was an officer of the Shah's household, and very wealthy. When he died, I, as his only son, inherited his wealth. I was young, rich, and not at all bad-looking, so I expected to lead a pleasant life. The Shah, who had protected my father, continued the son of his favor to me, and I accompanied him to the court at Tehran, where I speedily became high in his favor. But alas, added Ali in the flowery language of his country, soon did I cover the face of pleasure with the veil of mourning, and ride the horse of folly into the country of sorrow. He paused and then added with a sigh, her name was Aisha. Ah, said Hagar the cynic, I was waiting to hear the name of the woman. She ruined you, I suppose. She and another, sighed Ali, stroking his beard. I melted like wax in the flame of her beauty, and my heart turned to water at the glance of her eyes. She was Georgian, and fairer than the chief wife of Suleiman bin Daoud. But alas, alas! What saith Saidi? Wed a charmer and wed sorrow. Well, said Hagar rather patiently, I know all about her looks. Go on with the story. On my head be it, said Ali. I purchased this Georgian in Isfahan and made her my third wife. But so lovely and clever she was that I speedily raised her to the rank of the first. I adored her beauty and marveled at her wit. She sang like a bulbul and danced like a peri. She seems to have been a wonder, Ali. Go on. There was a man called Achmed who hated me very much, continued Ali, his eyes lighting up fiercely at the mention of the name. He saw that I was rich and favored by the King of Kings, so he set his wits to work to ruin me. Having heard of my beautiful wife Aisha, he told the Shah of her loveliness, which was that of a houri in paradise. Fired by the description, my sovereign visited at my house, and I received him with due splendor. He saw all my treasures, among others, my wife. I thought you Turks never presented your wives to strangers. We are Persians, not Turks, corrected Ali quietly, and the Shah is no stranger in the houses of his subjects. Also he has the right to pass the forbidden door to the abode of felicity. What is the abode of felicity? The harem, lady. But to tell you the story of my ruin. The Shah saw my beautiful Aisha, and her burning glances were as arrows of delight in his heart. He returned to his palace with a desire to possess my treasure. Achmed, who had right of access to the person of the Shah, strengthened this desire, and declared that I was unhappy with Ayesha. And were you? Ali sighed. After the coming of the King of Kings I was, he confessed. My wife wished to enter the royal harem and warm herself in the glory of the royal sun. She was silent and melancholy, or cross and fierce. I did what I could to console her, but she refused to listen to me, treated me as dirt beneath her feet, and sometimes she even smote me on the mouth with her pearl-embroidered slipper. Tales of our constant quarrels were carried to the Shah by the perfidious Achmed, who declared that I ill-treated my beautiful Georgian. At last Achmed told the king that I wished I were rid of the woman, if only for the meanest jewel worn by his august self. Did you say that? In a fit of rage one day I said something like it, said Ali darkly, but I never intended my foolish speech to be taken seriously. However, these idle words were reported to the Shah, and he sent for me. Ali, said he, it has been said that thou deemest the meanest thing worn by us of more value than your wife Ayesha. If that be so, take this ring, which we give thee freely, and surrender thy lightly valued wife to dwell in the shadow of our throne. Thou hast my leave to go. Lady, I bowed myself to the ground. I took the ring you know of, and I went. Did you not say that you wished to keep Ayesha? No, the word of the Shah is law. Had I expressed such a wish, I should have lost my head. As it was, I lost my wife. Returning home, I made known the Shah's desire, and urged her to fly with me beyond his power. Desirous of entering the royal Sarai, however, she refused, and so I carried her off by force. I drugged her one night, placed her on a camel, and set out for the nearest seaport disguised as a merchant. Was your flight successful? Alas, no, replied Ali in melancholy tones. Achmed was on the watch, and had me followed. My wife was taken from me by force, but only too willingly on her own part. For daring to disobey the royal command, I suffered the bastinado on the soles of my feet until I fainted away. Poor Ali! Mad with anger, I let the wrath of the heart overpower the judgment of the mind, and rashly joined in a conspiracy to overthrow the King of Kings. Again my evil genius Achmed thwarted and discovered me. I was forced to fly from Persia to save my life, and all my wealth was forfeited to the royal treasury. A goodly portion of it, however, was given to Achmed for his having found out the conspiracy. After many adventures, which I need not relate here, I came to this land, where I have lived in poverty and misery for 2 years. My wife is a queen in the Sarai of the Shah. My enemy is the ruler of a province, and I, lady, am the exile you see. All that I carried out of the Shah's kingdom was the ring which he gave me in exchange for my beautiful Ayesha. He paused, and Hagar waited for him to continue the story. Finding that he still kept silent, she addressed him impatiently. Is that all? Yes, except that since I have been here it has been told to me that both Achmed and Ayesha wish to get me back to Persia, that they may kill me. The Georgian never forgave me for carrying her away, and only my death will glut her vengeance. As for Achmed, he is never free from dread while I live, and wishes me to die also. If they can manage it, those two will have me carried back to Persia, and there have me slain. They can't take you out of London against your will. Ali shook his head. Who knows, said he. There is the case of the Chinaman who was lured into the embassy to be sent back to China. If the government of England had not interfered, he would have been a dead man by this time. I keep always away from the Persian embassy. You are wise to do so, replied Hagar, who remembered the case. But about the ring, why did you pawn it, and why did Mohammed steal it by means of the pawn ticket?" "There was a friend of mine in Persia," explained Ali, "who saved for me out of my property seized by the Shah a box of jewels. Knowing that I was starving in this land, he sent the jewels to me in charge of a servant. I received a letter from him in which he stated that the servant had been instructed to give up the jewels to me when I produced the ring. I foolishly told Mohammed about this, and one night he tried to thieve the ring from me, thinking that he would show it to my friend's servant, and get my jewels. In fear lest he should obtain it, I pawned it with you for safety, until the servant should arrive." "Is the servant here now?" "He arrived last week," replied Ali, mournfully, "and he is now waiting for me at Southampton. But alas, I speak foolishly. When I fell ill after pawning the ring, Mohammed stole the ticket, and, as you know, he obtained the ring. I have no doubt that by this time he has shown it to the servant of my friend, and is possessed of the jewels. Mohammed the accursed is rich, and I remain poor. Now, lady, you know why a darkness came over my spirit, and why I fell as one bereft of life. Surely I am the sport of fortune, and the most unlucky of men. I am he of whom the poet spoke when he said, 'Strive not, contend not, thy future is woe, accept of thy sorrows, for fortune's thy foe.'" The poor man recited this couplet in faltering tones, and burst into tears, rocking himself to and fro in an agony of grief. Hagar was sorry for this unfortunate person who had been so unlucky as to lose wife and wealth and country. She gave him the only comfort that was in her power. "Here are 20 shillings," said she, placing some silver in his hand. "Perhaps Mohammed has not yet gone to Southampton, or it may be that the servant with your jewels has not yet arrived. Go down to Hampshire and see if you can recover your ring." Ali thanked her with great emotion, and shortly afterwards left the shop, promising to tell her of the issue of this adventure. Hagar saw him go away with the fullest belief in his honesty of purpose, and perfect trust in the truth of his story. But later on, when alone, she began to wonder if she had not been gulled by 2 sharpers. The whole story told by Ali was so like an adventure of the Arabian Nights that Hagar became more than a trifle doubtful of its truth. As the days went by and Ali did not return as he had promised, she fancied that her belief was a true one. "Those 2 Persians have played a comedy of which I have been the dupe," she said to herself. "It has all been done to get money, and yet I am not sure. The pair would not take all that trouble for a miserable 20 shillings. After all, Ali's story may be true, and he may be at Southampton trying to recover his ring and jewels." In this conjecture she was perfectly right, for all the days of his absence Ali had been at Southampton vainly looking for Mohammed the thief. His 20 shillings had soon been expended, but luckily he had met with an Englishman whom he had known in Persia. This gentleman, an Oriental scholar and a liberal-minded man, had recognized Ali, dirty and miserable, as he haunted the Southampton quays looking for the servant of his friend and the recreant Mohammed. Carthew, for that was the Englishman's name, was profoundly shocked to find one whom he had known wealthy in such misery. He took Ali to his hotel, supplied him with food and clothes, and requested to know how the Persian had fallen so low. Ali told this Samaritan the same story as he had told Hagar, but versed in the craft and topsy-turvydom of the East, Carthew was not so surprised or skeptical as the gypsy girl had been. He was sorry for poor Ali, who had been for so long the butt of fortune, and determined to befriend him. I suppose there is no chance of your regaining the Shah's favour? He asked the unfortunate man in his own tongue. Alas, no. What is, is. I conspired against the King of Kings. I was betrayed by Achmed, so there is no way in which I can approach again the asylum of the universe. Humph, looks like it, growled Carthew, stroking his white beard. And Achmed, that son of a burnt father, is high in favour? Yes, he is the governor of a province, and as he is friendly with Aisha, who is now the favourite of the Shah, he is above all fortune. It is strange, added Ali reflectively, that those so rich and high-placed should wish to get me back to my death. They know they have wronged you, my friend, and so they hate you. But you are safe in England. Even the Shah cannot seize you here. Ali reminded Carthew, as he had done Hagar, of the Chinese kidnapping case which had created so great a stir in England. Carthew laughed. "Why, don't you see that the case is your very safeguard?" said he. "If the Persian embassy seized you, they would have to release you. Remember, now that I have met you, you are not friendless. You stay by me, Ali, and you will be safe from the vengeance of your wife and Achmed. But I do not wish to live on your charity." "You needn't," said the Oriental scholar bluntly. "As you know, I am translating the Epic of Kings which Ferdusi wrote. You must assist me, and I'll engage you as my secretary. In a few months you'll be on your feet again, and no doubt I shall be able to find you some regular employment. As for that scoundrel Mohammed who stole the ring, I'll set the police after him. By the way, I suppose he dare not go back to Persia again." "No, he was a conspirator also," replied Ali. "We fled together from the wrath of the Shah. He was nearly captured and beheaded in mistake for me, as we are so like one another. But he managed to escape, and joined me in England. Still he is safer here than I, as he has no powerful enemies who desire his return to Persia." "It's a case of dilly duck, come and be killed," said Carthew with a grim laugh. "Well, we must hunt up the scoundrel, and find your jewels if possible. Who was the friend who sent them to you?" "Feshnavat of Shiraz. He was a friend of my father's, and is, as you know, a great merchant." "Yes, I know him," said Carthew, nodding. "A fine old man. I have no doubt he recovered your jewels and sent them here all right. The pity is that he made their delivery depend upon the showing of the Shah's ring, though to be sure he never anticipated that a villain would rob you of it. Truly, Ali, you are the most unlucky of men." "Not since I met with you, O comforter of the poor," replied Ali gratefully. "You have been charitable and good, even as the woman who helped me in the great city. But to both reward shall come. What says the poet? Give freely to the poor your gold, what spent will come back 40-fold. "Ah, Ali," said Carthew with a half sigh, "your couplet and gratitude are but bringing the poesy of the East into the prose of the West. You are in London, my friend, in ordinary commonplace London, and not with Saadi in the gardens of Shiraz." Carthew was as good as his word, and employed Ali to aid him in translating the Epic of Kings. With the first money which he earned, the Persian visited Hagar, to repay her, and to tell her all that had befallen him since he had left her shop. Hagar was pleased to see him, and gratified at the refunding of the money, for such action quite restored her faith in Ali, which she had been beginning to lose. She asked after Mohammed, but concerning that rascal the Persian was unable to give any news. "He have took my ring and jewels," sighed Ali mournfully, "and in some land far away he live on my moneys. But the justice of Allah, who sees the black beetle in the black rock, will smite him." He will fall in his splendor and evil doing, as the people of Ad went down to the dust. It is written." In the meantime, Carthew, who had a genuine liking for Ali, made all inquiries about the absent Mohammed and the missing ring. For many weeks he learnt nothing, but finally chance set him on the track of the thief, and in the end he learnt all. He discovered what had become of Mohammed and of the ring, and the discovery astonished him not a little. It was an attaché of the Persian embassy who revealed the truth, and Carthew judged it best that the lips of this same man should relate the story to Ali. "My friend," said he one day to the Persian, "do you know a countryman of yours called Mirza Baba?" "I have heard of him," replied Ali slowly, "but he has not seen my face, nor have I beheld him." "Why do you ask?" "Because he knows what has become of your ring." "And of Mohammed?" "Oh, my friend, tell me of these things," cried the Persian. "Nay, Ali, it is better that the truth should come from the lips of Mirza Baba himself. I will ask him here to tell you." "But he may learn who I am," muttered Ali in dismay. "I think not, as he has never seen your face," replied Carthew, smiling. "Besides—" He broke off with a nod. "Well, you'll hear the story as he tells it. But call all your self-command and oriental impassiveness to your aid. You'll need courage." "Let it be as you say," rejoined Ali, folding his hands. "Today and tomorrow are in the hands of the All-Wise." True to his promise, Carthew next day received Mirza Baba in his house, and introduced him to Ali, who gave his countryman a feigned name. The Persian of the embassy, who was a very great man indeed, paid little attention to Ali, whom he regarded simply as the secretary of Carthew, and as one quite beneath his notice. This neglect suited Ali, who sat meekly on one side and listened to his own story, and to the story of Mohammed and the missing ring. Mirza Baba, in response to the request of Carthew, told it over pipes and coffee, and greatly astonished Ali in the telling. "You know," said the Mirza, addressing himself particularly to Carthew, and quite ignoring his own countrymen, "that this dog of an Ali, on whose head be curses, had the folly to conspire against the peace of the Shah, on whom be blessings. He escaped from the land of the sun, and came to this island of thine. Hither he was traced, and to assert the majesty of the asylum of the universe, it was resolved that this son of a burnt father should be brought back to Persia for punishment. The Banu Aisha, who is the pearl of the East, was bent upon seeing the head of this traitor, to whom aforetime she had been wife, ere the King of Kings had deigned to cast his eyes upon her. Also Achmed, the most zealous of governors, who had discovered the conspiracy of the evil-minded Ali, wished to punish him. Orders were sent to our embassy that Ali should be taken, even in the streets of London, and sent back in chains to the court of Teheran. But this it was difficult to do." "I think so," replied Carthew dryly. "The Chinese embassy tried on that game with Sun Yat, and had to give him up. The English government do not recognize the embassies as so many neutral territories in London." "It is true, I know it," answered Baba coolly. "Well, as there was no chance of capturing Ali in that way, it was resolved to employ stratagem. A letter, purporting to be written by Feshnavat of Shiraz, was sent to this traitor, in which it was set forth that a box of jewels, saved from the wreck of his property, was being sent to England, and that it would be given up at Southampton to the bearer of the Shah's ring." "You know of the ring, my friend," added the Mirza. "Yes, the ring given by the Shah to Ali in exchange for his wife. Go on." "That is so. the dog surrendered his spouse, who is now the pearl of Persia, for the meanest ring worn by the Shah. It was known that he bore it to this land, so it was arranged by the Pearl and Achmed that such ring should be the means to lure this traitor to his death. Well, my friend, continued Baba with a chuckle, the plot contrived by the wit of Banu Aisha was successful. Ali went to Southampton, and finding the supposed servant of Feshnavat, produced the ring, and demanded the jewels. This was at night, so at once the traitor was seized and placed on board the waiting vessel to be taken to Persia. That was very clever, said Carthew, stealing a glance at Ali, who was painfully white. And what happened then? Lies and misfortune, replied Baba Mirza. This Ali, when he learnt the truth, swore that he was not the man we sought, but one Mohammed, and that he had stolen the ring to get the jewels. Of course no one believed this story, which no doubt was a mere trick to save his life. He was carefully watched, and was told that on arriving in Persia he would be beheaded at once. In fear of this death, the wretch escaped one night from the cabin in which he was confined and threw himself into the sea. He left behind him the ring, and this, seeing that the man was dead, was taken to Persia in proof that Ali had been seized. The ring is now worn by the Pearl of Persia, but never has she ceased regretting that Ali escaped her vengeance. After telling this story, which was listened to with outward composure but inward fear by Ali, the Mirza took his leave. When alone with the Persian, Carthew turned to address him. Well, Ali, said he kindly, you see fortune has not forsaken you yet. She has saved you and punished Mohammed for his theft. What is, said Ali with oriental impassiveness. But in truth it is wondrous that I escaped the snare. Now I can live in peace, for thinking me dead, neither Aisha nor Achmed will seek me again. I have lost the ring, it is true, but I have gained my life. Now I shall take another name, and dwell for the span of my days in England. It is a queer ending to the story, said Carthew reflectively. The tale is as strange as any of the 1001 Nights, replied Ali. It should be written in letters of gold. It is of such that the poet writes, Go forward on thy path, though darkness hides it. Thy destiny is sure, for Allah guides it. End of chapter 11. Chapter 12 of Hagar of the Pawnshop by Fergus Hume. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Passing of Hagar. It was now 2 years since Hagar had presented herself to the astonished eyes of Jacob Dix, and 1 year since the death of the old miser had left her in sole charge of the pawnshop. During all these months she had striven hard to do her duty, for the sake of the man who had taken pity on her poverty. She had toiled early and late, she had neglected no opportunity to make bargains, and she had lived penuriously the meanwhile. All moneys accruing from the business she had paid into the bank, and all accounts of receipts and payments she had placed in the hands of Vark the lawyer. At any time that Goliath chose to arrive, she was ready to hand over the pawnshop and property to him, after which it was her intention to leave. As yet she had no idea in her head what was to become of her when the arrival of the lost heir reduced her to the position of a pauper. It had indeed occurred to her that it would be best to return to her tribe again, and take up the old gypsy life. On account of Goliath she had exiled herself from the Romany tents. so when he came into his inheritance, she would be free to return thereto. As a wealthy man, Jimmy Dix, alias Goliath, would not care to spend his life in roaming the country with vagrants, and thus she would be relieved of his presence. Hagar was getting very tired of the shop and the weary life of Carby's Crescent, and often the nostalgia of the roads came upon her. Several times of late she had wished that Goliath would claim his inheritance and relieve her of the irksome task which she had taken on her own shoulders out of gratitude to Jacob Dix. But as yet the absent heir had not made his appearance. Hagar knew very well that Eustace Lorne was looking for him. Pursuant to the promise he had given her, and expecting the reward of her hand on his return, Lorne had been these many months on the trail of the missing man. All over England and Scotland had he tramped, inquiring of every gypsy, every vagrant, every town scamp, the whereabouts of Goliath. But all in vain, for Goliath seemed to have vanished completely. Indeed, Eustace began to fear that he was not in the United Kingdom, else he would certainly have heard of him, or the man would have seen in the newspapers the advertisement inquiring for his whereabouts. From time to time Eustace wrote to Hagar of his ill success, and received replies wherein she expressed her detestation of the shop, and bidding him to continue his search, whereupon, encouraged to fresh exertions, Eustace would resume his wanderings. His adventures while thus engaged were many and various, and in the end his efforts were crowned with success. One day, while Hagar was seated rather disconsolately in the back parlor, the side door, which had been used by Dix for such of his friends as wished to dispose of stolen goods, a form of business which Hagar had abandoned, was opened boldly, and a tall man strode into the room. Hagar rose indignantly to repel the intruder, who had no right to enter by that way, when suddenly she saw his countenance and fell back a step. "Goliath!" she said with a pale face. The tall man, he was almost a giant in point of height and size, nodded and smiled. He had closely cropped red hair, and a rather brutal cast of countenance, by no means prepossessing. Again familiarly nodding to Hagar, who recoiled from him in aversion, he seated himself in a large armchair by the fire, which had formerly been used by dead Jacob Dix. "My father's chair," said he with a grin. "I have come to take possession of it, my dear." "I am very glad to hear it," replied Hagar, recovering the use of her tongue. "Certainly it was about time, Mr. Dix." "Don't call me Mr. or Dix, my dear. To you I shall always be Goliath, your Goliath." "Indeed you shan't," retorted Hagar, in a spirited manner. "I hate you now just as much as I did when you forced me to leave my people. That is uncommon cruel of you, seeing as you have been wearing my shoes all this time." "I have been wearing your father's shoes, you mean, and for your benefit solely. I did so simply because your father was good enough to take me in, after you had exiled me from the Romany." "Oh, I know all about that, Cousin Hagar. We're cousins, ain't we?" "Yes, and we are likely to continue cousins. But I'm tired of this sparring, Goliath. Where have you been all this time, and how did you learn that your father was dead?" "Where I've been I'll tell you later," replied Goliath, rendered surly by the attitude of Hagar. "And as to how I knowed the old 'un was gone, why, a cove called Lorne told me just after I got out." "Got out!" cried Hagar, noting the queer wording of the phrase. "So you have been in prison, Goliath?" "You're a sharp one, you are," grinned the red-haired man. "Yes, I've been in quod, though I didn't intend to tell you so yet. I was number 43 till a week ago, and they ticketed me for horse-coping. I got 2 years, and was took just arter you gave me the slip in New Forest. So now you know how I didn't see your newspaper notice about the old 'un kicking the bucket." "You might speak of your father with more respect," said Hagar, in a disdainful tone. "But what can one expect from a convict?" "Come, none of that, cousin, or I'll twist your neck." "You dare to lay a finger on me, and I'll kill you," retorted Hagar fiercely. "Yeah, you're as much a spitfire as ever." "More so, to you," replied the girl. "I hate you now as I did when I left my tribe. Now you have come back, I'll go." "And who is to look after the shop?" "That is your business. My task here is ended. Tomorrow I'll show you all the accounts." "Won't you share the property with me?" asked Goliath in a wheedling tone. "No, I shan't. Tomorrow you must come with me and see Vark to—" "Vark!" echoed Goliath, starting to his feet. "Is it that old villain who is to hand me over my tin?" "Yes, your father employed him, so I thought—" "Don't think. There ain't no time for thinking. Job! I'd better get my money afore the head of old Vark is stove in." "What do you mean?" asked Hagar, bewildered by his tone. "Mean?" echoed Goliath, pausing at the door. "Well, I was in quod, as I told ye. There I came across Bill Smith." "The Mandarin customer?" "Yes. We managed to talk. How, it don't matter to you. But I guess when Bill Smith's out of quod, that Vark is bound for Kingdom Come. And Bill Smith is out." "What?" shrieked Hagar, alive at once to the danger which threatened the lawyer. "Out? Escaped?" "That's the case. He got away last week, and they ain't got him yet. I'd best go and tell Vark to load his pistols. I don't want the old villain choked till I get my property squared. You come too, cousin." "Not just now. Tomorrow." "Tomorrow won't do for me," growled Goliath. "You come today, quick." "Oh," said Hagar very disdainfully, "it is no use your taking that tone with me, Goliath. I must get ready my accounts tonight, and tomorrow, if you come here, I'll take them with you to Vark. When everything is set out to your satisfaction, you can enter into your property at once." "Then you won't come with me now?" "No, I have given you my answer." "You'd best give me £1 or 2, said Goliath crossly. "I'm cleaned out, and I need money to get a bed for the night. You are as obstinate as ever, I see. But if you won't come, you won't. But I'll go and see Vark myself, and tell him about Bill Smith." After which speech Goliath, with money in his pocket, went off to see the lawyer, cursing Hagar freely for her obstinacy. The man entirely forgot how she had devoted herself these many months to looking after his property. All he thought of was, that he loved her now as much as he had done in the old days, and that she was still set on having nothing to do with him. Had she been an ordinary girl, he might have broken her spirit, but it was useless to attempt bullying with Hagar. She would give as good as she got, and this great hulking Goliath could only admire and desire this spirited gypsy girl who disdained him and his money. "Well," said Hagar to herself as she saw the last of him, "I have had one unexpected visitor, so by all the laws of coincidence I should have another today. I never knew one strange event happen without another following on its heels." Hagar did not think precisely in so bookish a fashion, but the gist of her ideas was as above, and this proved correct before nightfall, at which time the unexpected second event duly occurred. This was none other than the arrival of Eustace Lorn, who entered the shop with a smile on his lips and a love light in his eyes. The girl knew his step, by some intuition of love, no doubt, and rushed to meet him with outstretched hands. These Eustace clasped ardently in his own, but as yet, so dignified was the attitude of Hagar, he did not venture to kiss her. His speech was warmer than his actions. "Hagar, my dear Hagar," he cried in rapture, "at last I have come back. Are you not glad to see me?" "I am delighted," replied Hagar, beaming with pleasure. more delighted than I was to see Goliath." "Ah, he has returned then. I found him at last, you see, and I recognized him from your description." "He did not tell me of your meeting, Eustace." "Oh, it was in this way," replied Lorn, as they entered the parlor together. "I had searched for him everywhere, as you know, but could not find him. Where he has been all these months I cannot say, as at our interview he refused to tell me." "Perhaps he had a good reason for his silence," said Hagar, noting the fact that Goliath had kept quiet concerning his prison experiences. "I dare say," laughed Lorn. "He looks a scamp. Well, I was down near Weybridge, resting by the roadside, when I saw a tall, red-haired man passing. Remembering your description of Jimmy Dix, I felt sure that it was him, and I called out the name Goliath. To my surprise, instead of stopping, he took to his heels." "Ah, he had a good reason for that also." "Not an honest one, I am afraid. Well, I ran after him, and in spite of his long legs I managed to catch him up. Then he showed fight. But when I explained who I was, and who you were, and how his father had died and left a fortune, Goliath grew quiet and friendly. He fraternized with me, accepted the loan of a few shillings, which was all I could spare, and took himself off to London." "You have seen him?" "Yes, and tomorrow I make up my accounts and give him over his property. Then I shall be free." "Free? Oh," cried Hagar, stretching her arms, "how delicious it will be to be free once more, to leave this weary London and see the sky and stars, sunrise and sunset, to hear the birds, and breathe the fresh air of the moors. I am going back to my tribe, you know." "I don't know," said Eustace, taking her hand. "But I do know that I love you, and I have an idea that you love me. In this case I think that instead of going back to your tribe, you should come to your husband." "My husband? You?" cried Hagar, with a charming blush. "If you love me," said Eustace, and then was quiet. "You leave the burden of proposing on me," cried Hagar again. "Well, my dear, I will not hide from you that I do love you. Hush! Let me go on. I have seen but little of you, yet what I have seen I have loved, every inch of it. I can read faces and estimate character better than most, and I know that you are a true, good, honorable man, who will make me, a poor gypsy, a better husband than I dared to expect. Yes, Eustace, I love you. If you care, I will marry you." "Care? Marry me?" said Lorn in rapture. "Why, my angel—" "One moment," interrupted Hagar, more seriously. "You know that I have no money, Eustace. Jacob Dix did not leave me a penny. I refuse to take anything from Goliath, who wants to marry me, and tomorrow I leave this shop as poor as when I came into it 2 years ago. Now you are poor also, so 2 paupers are foolish to marry." "But I am not poor," cried Eustace, smiling. "That is, I am not rich, but I have sufficient for you and me to lead the life we love." "But the life I love is the gypsy life," objected Hagar. "I also am Romany by instinct," said Eustace joyously. "Have I not led the life of a vagabond these many months while looking for Goliath? See here, my dearest girl. When I left you, I sold the Florentine Dante to a collector of books for a goodly sum. With the money I bought a caravan, and stocked it with books suitable for the country folk. All this time, my dear, I have been traveling with my caravan from town to town, earning my living by selling books, and I find it, really and truly, a very profitable concern. I ask you to be my wife, to share my caravan and gypsy life. So if you—" "Eustace!" cried Hagar, joyfully, and threw her arms round his neck. That was all. The situation adjusted itself between them without further words. When the pair stepped out into Carby's Crescent to see the caravan, it was round the corner. They were already betrothed. For once in this world the course of true love was running smoothly. To marry Eustace, to live in a caravan, to wander about the country in true Bohemian fashion. Hagar could conceive of no sweeter existence. At last she was rewarded for her toils in the pawnshop. "This is our future home, Hagar," said Eustace, and pointed to the caravan. It was a very spick and span vehicle, painted a light canary color, picked out with pale blue, and on either side was inscribed, also in azure, the legend, "E. Lorne, bookseller." A sleek gray horse in brown harness was between the shafts, and the windows of the caravan were barred with brass rods and curtained with the whitest of curtains. Hagar fell in love with this delightful Noah's Ark, as Eustace playfully called it, and clapped her hands. As it was about 6 o'clock and twilight, the street was almost emptied of people, so Hagar could indulge in her raptures to her heart's content. "Oh, Eustace, Eustace, 'tis beautiful, 'tis perfect," she cried. "If it is as neat within as without, I shall love it dearly." "You'll make me jealous of the caravan," said Eustace rather uneasily. "But don't look inside, Hagar." "Why not?" said she with a wondering look. "Oh, because he began in confusion and then stopped. Hagar looked at the door of the caravan, and Eustace turned his eyes in the same direction. It opened slowly, and a face, a brutal white face, looked out. The man to whom this visage, it was covered with a hairy growth of some days, belonged, peered out at Eustace. Then his gaze wandered to Hagar. As the light fell on his sullen looks, she gave a cry. The man on his side uttered an oath, and the next moment, dashing open the door, he had leaped out, and brushing past the pair, was racing down the street which led from Carby's Crescent into the larger thoroughfare. Eustace looked surprised at this sudden flight, and turned an inquiring look on Hagar, who was pale as sculptured stone. "Why are you so pale?" he said, taking her hand. "And why did my friend run away at the sight of you?" "Your friend?" said Hagar faintly. "Yes, for the time being, at all events. He is only a poor tramp I found near Esher the other day. He was lying in a ditch half dead for want of food, so I took him into my caravan and looked after him till he got better. He asked me to take him up to London, and I was about to tell you about him when he ran away. Why did you not wish me to look into the caravan?" "Well," said Eustace, "this tramp seemed rather nervous. I'm afraid a hard life has told on the poor soul. A strange face always made him afraid, and I thought that if you looked in suddenly he might be alarmed. As it is, he was alarmed when he did see me," burst out Hagar. "He might well be, as I know him." "You know him? That tramp?" "Tramp? He is a convict, Bill Smith, the one I wrote to you about." "What? That blackguard who was engaged in the mandarin swindle?" cried Eustace, taken aback. "Who stole those diamonds? I thought he was in prison." "So he was, but he escaped last week. The police are looking for him." "Who told you this, Hagar?" "Goliath. He was in prison also, for horse stealing. But he has just been let out, a few days ago. Bill Smith, Larky Bill as they call him, broke out, and he wants to kill Vark, the lawyer." "Then I have unconsciously helped him to escape justice," said Lorne in vexed tones. "I really thought he was a tramp. Had I known who he was, I would not have helped him. He is a brute." "He'll be a murderer soon," cried Hagar feverishly. "For heaven's sake, Eustace, repair your error by going to Scotland Yard and telling them that the man is in London. You may be able to prevent a crime." "I'll go," said Eustace, getting on to the driving seat of the caravan. "I'll see about this tonight, and return to talk to you tomorrow. One moment," he leaped down again. "A kiss, my dear." "Eustace, there are people about." "Well, they didn't stop Bill Smith running away, so they won't object to a kiss between an engaged couple. Goodbye, dearest, for the last time. Tomorrow we meet to part no more. It was in considerable agitation that Hagar returned to her pawn-shop. The coming of Goliath, the arrival of Eustace, the unexpected escape of Bill Smith, all these events crowded so rapidly into her life in the space of an hour, as one might say, that she felt unnerved and alarmed. She did not know what the next day might bring forth, and was particularly careful in locking up the house on this night, lest the escaped convict should take it into his head to enter therein as a burglar. The next 12 hours were anything but pleasant to Hagar. With the daylight came more assurance, also Vark and Goliath. The lean lawyer was much agitated at the news of the escape, and feared, as he well might, that his miserable life was not safe from so bitter an enemy as Larky Bill. However, his fear did not prevent him from attending to business, and the whole of that morning Hagar was busy explaining accounts and payments and receipts to Vark and Goliath. The lawyer tried hard to find fault with the administration of Hagar, to pick holes in her statements, but thanks to the rigid honesty of the girl and the careful manner in which she had conducted her business, Vark, to his great disgust, was unable to harm her in any way. Everything was arranged fairly, and Goliath expressed himself quite satisfied with the statement of his property. Then he made a speech. "It seems that I have 30,000 quid," said he exultingly. "Also a pop shop, which I'll give the kick to. With the rhino I can set up as a gent." "That you can never be," retorted Hagar scornfully. "Not unless you look arter me. See here, you jade, when I was poor you said naught to me. Now I am rich you—" "I say the same, Goliath. When you were an honest man I refused you. Now you are a felon." "I was a felon," corrected Goliath. "I'm out of quad now." "Well, I won't marry you. I hate you," cried Hagar, stamping her foot. "And indeed, if you must know, I'm going to marry Eustace Lorne." "What, that puppy?" cried Goliath in a rage. "That man, which you aren't. I'll live in a caravan and sell books." Here Goliath broke out into imprecations, and was hardly restrained from violence, so enraged was he. He swore that for her years of service he would not give Hagar a penny. She would leave the pawn-shop as poor as when she entered it. "I intend to," said Hagar coolly. "I shan't even take the mourning I wore for your father. My red dress is good enough for the caravan of Eustace, and tomorrow I'll put it on and leave the pawn-shop forever." This was all that Goliath could get out of her. He offered to settle the money on her, to go in a caravan round the country if she wished it, but all to no purpose. Hagar had surrendered her stewardship in such wise that not even Vark, who hated her, could find a flaw in the accounts. These things being settled, she declared that she was going away with Eustace after one more night in the pawn-shop. First the altar and the marriage service, then the caravan and the country, and from this program Hagar never swerved. That same evening Eustace came to see Hagar, and told her that he had given notice at Scotland Yard of Smith's escape, and that the police were now looking for him. While they were talking this over, Vark, pale and scared-looking, made his appearance. He told the engaged pair a piece of news which astonished them not a little. "I went to the police about Smith," said he, rubbing his lean hands together, "and I found out that not only one convict escaped, but two." "Two!" cried Hagar. "And the second?" "Is Goliath, your friend Jimmy Dix. He got 3 years, not 2, and he broke prison with Larky Bill." "What a fool to come here!" cried Eustace, recovering from his surprise. "On the contrary, I think he was very wise," said Hagar. "Only I knew him as Goliath, and under that name he was arrested and sentenced. As James Dix, the heir of Jacob, the owner of £30,000, no one would suspect him of being an escaped convict. But how did he get rid of his prison clothes?" "The police told me," grinned Vark. "The two broke into a house and stole suits to fit 'em. Bill Smith was wounded by a steel trap, so hid in the ditch where Mr. Lorne found him. Goliath came up here boldly to get his money. If I hadn't heard his description at Scotland Yard, I should never have suspected him." "Did you tell them he was here?" asked Lorne sharply. "No, but I'll do so unless he gives me half his money. £15,000. If he does, I'll smuggle him over to America. If he doesn't—" "Well," said Hagar, "if he doesn't, you Judas, I'll give him up to the police." "You beast!" cried the girl furiously. "You low reptile! You make capital out of everything. Goliath has conferred nothing on you but benefits. Why, he warned you about Smith, and so gave himself into your hands. Yet you would betray him." "I thought you hated the man," quavered Vark, astonished at this outburst. "So I do, but I think you might let him enjoy his money in peace. If he has been in jail, he hasn't deserved it half so much as you." "I want half his money," said the lawyer sullenly. "What good will it do?" asked Lorne. "Bill Smith may kill you." "I'm not afraid of him," snapped Vark, turning pale nevertheless. "I have Bolker to stay with me at night, and I've got my pistols. Besides, the police are after Bill, so he won't come here." "Yes, he will," said Hagar, throwing open the door. "He'll gladly give his own neck to twist yours. Get out of this place, Judas! You poison the air!" Vark whimpered and protested, but Hagar drove him out and locked the door on him. When in the street, he turned round and shook his fist at the house wherein dwelt the woman he now hated as much as he had loved. She had escaped his toils, she had run clear of the traps he had laid for her, and now, having discharged her trust towards the dead, she was going out into the wide world with the man she loved. Poor indeed as regards worldly wealth, but rich in the possession of Lorne's honest heart. No wonder Vark was wrathful. The house in which Vark lived was down by the river, and near that ruinous wharf whither Bill Smith on a certain memorable occasion had dragged Bolker. It was a gloomy old ramshackle mansion, which had seen better days in the early part of the century, but now it was given over to the lawyer, his deaf old housekeeper, and the rats. On the present occasion Bolker was also staying there, by desire of Vark. The wretched solicitor who had sold so many thieves, and who was now terribly afraid of one, insisted that the lad should stay by him in case of need. But Nemesis was not to be tricked in that way. Passing through the gloomy streets on his way to this den, Vark, who had grown a trifle hard of hearing, did not hear the stealthy footfalls of one who stole after him, nor did he see a shadow gliding close at his heels. It was a windy night, and the moon was veiled on occasions by a rack of flying clouds. The lawyer walked slowly on until he ascended the flight of worn steps which led to his hall door. As he did so, a black cloud swept over the moon, and lingered there so long that Vark could not find the keyhole. When he did so, the door blew open with a crash, and Vark measured his length on the stone pavement of the hall. Bill Smith saw his opportunity of entering the house unnoticed, and flew swiftly up the steps, and past the prostrate man, who was so confused by his fall that he did not know of the man flitting by. At this moment Bill could have killed Vark easily, but he judged that the hall with the open door was too public. Moreover, he wished to get into the room where the lawyer kept his safe. Vark once dead, and Bill intended to open the safe with his keys and then escape well laden with plunder. But of all these dark plans against his life and moneys, Vark was ignorant. As he gathered himself up and closed the door, his housekeeper came down the stairs with a candle. Grumbling at her for being late, Vark made her precede him into a little room at the back, looking on to the river. Larky Bill took off his boots, grasped the knife he was carrying, and went after the old man and woman. When he looked through a crack of the door into the room, he started back and swore under his breath, for therein were Bolker and Goliath. Bill began to think he would not be able to kill Vark after all. He hid in a dark corner as the housekeeper repassed him on the way up the stairs, and then returned to his vantage point near the door of the room, where he could both hear and see. What ensued made him more resolved than ever to kill Vark. Such an ungrateful bloodsucker, thought Bill, did not deserve to live. I am glad to see you here, said Vark to Goliath, who rose at his entry. You got my note asking you? Yes, or I shouldn't be cooling my heels in this hole of yours, growled Goliath savagely. What do you want? 15,000 pounds, said Vark tersely. Half the money left by the old 'un. And why? Because I know you bolted from jail, replied Vark coolly, and that the police are looking for you. Do you intend to give me up? Asked Goliath, grinding his teeth. Vark rubbed his hands. Why not? He snarled. I gave up Bill Smith and got the reward, but I'd rather have half your money than put you in jail again. I've a mind to kill you. Oh, I'm not frightened, said Vark with an ugly look. Bolker sits here, and Bolker has pistols. You can't kill me. No, I'll leave Bill Smith to do that, said Goliath coolly. Bah! I'm not afraid of that ruffian. Before Goliath could reply, there was a roar like an angry beast. The door was burst violently open, and Bill Smith, knife in hand, hurled himself into the room. Vark yelled shrilly like a rabbit caught in a trap, and the next moment was dashed to the ground by the infuriated convict. Bolker ran out of the room crying for the police, and flew through the passage out of the hall door and into the windy night. His shrieks roused the neighborhood. In a flash, Goliath saw a chance of gaining a pardon by saving Vark from being murdered. He threw himself on Bill, who was striking blindly with his knife at the struggling lawyer, and strove to wrench him off. Let be, curse you! Shrieked the convict. He sold me. He said he'd sell you. If I swing for it, I'll kill him. No, damn you, no! Goliath plucked the wretch off the prostrate man like a limpet off a rock, and then commenced a furious struggle between the pair. Vark, wounded and covered with blood, had fainted away. The next moment, while Smith and Goliath were swaying together in a fierce embrace, the room was filled with policemen, brought hither by the shrieking Bolker. Seeing them enter, Bill, wrenching himself free of Goliath, snatched up a revolver that Bolker had left on the table when he fled, and fired 2 shots at the prostrate body of his enemy. Yah, brute! Curse you! Die! Then he returned to the window which overlooked the river, and keeping the police at bay with the pistol, he wrenched it open. Goliath sprang forward to seize him, but Bill, with a howl of rage, dashed the revolver in his face. Curse you for rounding on a pal! The next moment he had swung himself out of the window, and those in the room heard the splash of his heavy body as it struck the waters of the Thames. 2 months after the foregoing event, a caravan painted yellow and drawn by a grey horse was rolling along one of the green lanes leading to Walton-on-Thames. It was the beginning of spring, and the buds were already running along the leafless branches of the trees, while the sharpness of the air was tempered by a balmy breath foretelling the advent of the warm months of the year. Beside the caravan strode a tall, dark man arrayed in a rough suit of homespun, and near him walked a woman with an imperial carriage and lordly gait. She wore a dress of dark red, much stained and worn, but her eye was full of fire and her cheek healthy. The pair were of humble condition, but looked contented and happy. As the horse plodded onward in the bursts of sunlight, the two talked. "So Vark died after all, Hagar," said the man gravely. "As you know," she replied, "the 2 pistol shots killed him, and Bill Smith was drowned in the river as he attempted to escape. He gave up his life to compass his revenge. I am glad Goliath was pardoned." "Oh, as to that," said Hagar indifferently, "I am neither glad nor sorry. I think myself that he strove only to save Vark in order to gain pardon." "Well, he got what he wanted," said Eustace reflectively. "He wouldn't if the public hadn't taken the matter up," retorted Hagar. "But they made him out a hero. Nonsense! As if Goliath was the man to forgive Vark, who intended to sell him. Well, he is free now, and rich. I dare say he'll lose all his money in dissipation. He had much better have held on to the pawn shop instead of giving it up to Bolker. Bolker is very young to have a business." "Don't you believe it," replied Hagar dryly. "Bolker is young in years, but old in wickedness. He bought the pawn shop business with the reward he got from Lord Deacey for recovering the diamonds. Bolker will grind down the poor of Carby's Crescent and develop into a second Jacob Dix." "You are glad to be away from the pawn shop?" "I should think so," she replied, with a loving glance at Eustace. "I am glad to leave dirty Lambeth for the green fields of the country. I am a gypsy, and not used to the yoke of commerce. Also, my dear, I am glad to be with you always." "Are you indeed, Mrs. Lorne?" said her husband, laughing. "Yes, Mrs. Lorne," repeated Hagar very sedately. "I am Mrs. Lorne now, and Hagar of the pawnshop, with all her adventures, is a phantom of the past." Eustace kissed her, and then chirruped the horse onward. They passed down the lane, across the dancing shadows, and went away hopefully into the green country towards the gypsy life. Hagar of the pawnshop had come to her own at last. End of chapter 12. End of Hagar of the Pawnshop by Fergus Hume.